Here we go on a Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And, of course, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Hennings producing today's show. You out there. Ah, boy. It feels like the Phillies all of a sudden have turned the corner a bit. Back-to-back double-digit runs. Of course, they scored 15 last night after 13 the night before. I don't know if that's more of a reflection of how bad the Cubs have become. What happened to the Cubs? They were in first place not too long ago. Phillies should win tonight. Wheeler's on the mound. Got to win tonight. Said it yesterday. They should sweep this series. If they don't, it should be a disappointment to all the people out there. But let's not rain on the parade. They won last night. They scored a lot of runs. The lineup is healthy. They're scoring some runs. Rhys Hoskins is really swinging a hot bat right now. Like what I see from the lineup. How can you not? They scored 28 runs over the last two games here against some bad Cubs pitching. Arrieta was dreadful last night. And obviously the Phils are looking good the last couple of nights. And with the win last night for the Phils, that puts them in a spot where we talked about if they could sweep this series and go against Boston and get, one in the Boston series. You look at the standings right now, guess what? Yesterday, Philly was in fourth place. Today, they're in second place. Yeah. Phils are 4 games back. They jumped over both Atlanta, who lost last night, and Washington, who lost last night. But let's make no mistake about this. They need to win this game tonight with Zach Wheeler pitching. I can't come on here and start to praise the Phillies and then them take a step. That would be taking, a step backwards. If you lose tonight after winning the first 2 games of the series with, let's be honest, your ace on the mound, Zach Wheeler is your ace. He's got to win the game tonight. They got to win the game tonight. That would get them to 500. And then we got an interesting ball game. You have the game on Thursday night to close that series out with the Cubs before you have 3 against Boston. And I said it yesterday. Can they get to the midway point at 500? Can they get to the 500 point, stay right there, and then you have the full second half of the season to say, hey, we had some bumps in the road. We were up and down. Here we go. Let's get this thing together. We got a healthy lineup, which give them credit. They do have a healthy lineup, and that certainly helped the last 2 nights to score 28 runs. Bryce Harper, by the way, had just a tremendous game last night. 5 for 6 with 4 RBI, including another home run for Harper last night. He actually hit some runners on base. He had 2 on and 2 out. And he hits the bomb there, his 15th of the year. Hoskins had just a majestic blast last night. That was his 20th of the year. And McCutchen started it all off, man, with that. McCutchen has 14 homers this year. He's on pace for almost 30 home runs. So McCutchen getting a little fountain of the youth here as this season has gone on. And it's good to see. McCutchen's up to 233, but the on-base percentage, 352. That's a much better number from where he was. Hoskins, his 236 after 3 hits last night, so his average is still a little low, but the power numbers are there. I thought last night Nola was not excellent, but he kind of battled last night. 6 innings, and, he was kind of scuffing along, but the offense helped him out. They allowed him to stay out there a little longer. Now, yesterday, of course, I give the rub to Bailey Falter, and he didn't make me look so good. It's my fault, Josh says. I would say this, okay? That is not a position that is conducive. I'm talking about Bailey Falter. My buddy texted me this morning. Everybody likes to play gotcha. Like, hey, I heard you say this, what you said about Bailey Falter. Well, context is king here, dude. He texted me, you still loving Falter and thinking we should rely on him for the second half? First off, I didn't say I loved Falter. What I said was, if you strictly look at the numbers, he deserves a shot. I didn't say he is going to take the shot and run with it. I said he deserved a shot. Last night is not what I was talking about. They didn't put him into a high leverage situation last night. He goes into the game, and the Phillies are up, what, 10, 15 to 4? It's 15 to 4. That's not a high leverage situation. That's a, hey, just go out there and throw strikes situation. That's a terrible spot. No pitcher wants to go in that spot. That's not a spot to judge a pitcher in. Hey, you're in mop-up duty. So they didn't look at Bailey Falter the way that I looked at him. They looked at him as, hey, go to mop-up duty. And mop-up duty is this. Mop-up duty in the majors is the worst. You know why? Because the game is so stripped down at that point. Hey, we're up 10 runs. Just go out there and throw strikes. Just don't walk anybody. So what does that mean? Just throw the ball over the plate. You're going to throw the ball over the plate to big league hitters. What's going to happen? They're going to hit you. They have no pressure. They're down 10 runs. So the way they used Bailey Falter last night, I thought was a disservice to him. So now his numbers, of course, don't look like he deserves the shot to go out there. They had to put it this way. They had a call on Neris to get Falter out of a mess last night. I thought De Los Santos actually pitched pretty well in the inning that he threw with 3 strikeouts. I mean, gave up a couple of hits, but they still got bullpen issues. That game got interesting last night because of what Falter did in the 7th. I flip it back and forth. I never even really saw Falter pitch. They're up 15 to 4. What did I do? I went over to the basketball game. So I'm watching the basketball game. I flip back over. It's 15 to 10. I said, what the heck happened here? And I see what happens. Bailey Falter came in, did not throw very well. But that being said, the Phils get the win last night. Good for them. They needed it. And look, they're in second place. They're 4 back. And let me check out this wild card, because yesterday we were talking about how, the wild card is not really in the mix for them. And I don't think it is. I mean, they won a game last night. I don't know what the teams in front of them did. They're 7.5 back still in the wild card. The Padres won last night. The Cardinals won last night. And the Dodgers have lost 2 straight. So you've kind of moved the needle. Well, the Dodgers are 3 up in the wild card on the second team. So they're comfortably in the wild card right now. San Diego's the second team in the wild card, followed by the Reds and the Cardinals and the Phillies. The Phillies are 7.5 back, but they've made a jump over a couple of teams last night. Look, they've jumped over the Cubs. The Cubs have they've lost 11 straight. They've turned into an absolute atrocity. They got to figure out, hey, Jake Arrieta, we've all seen it play out here. They got to figure out what to do with Jake Arrieta. I talked about it 2 years ago, that you got to get him out of the starting rotation, and you got to think about Arrieta being in the back end of a bullpen. Or not even the back end of a bullpen. Most likely now, you're thinking about using him just in some sort of bullpen role, because you can't keep starting him. He's been terrible. And the one thing I'll give for the Phillies last night as well, we talk about the lineup and how, they're finally healthy, right? The lineup has been put together for the first time since, I think Frank mentioned the other day, since Mother's Day. But I talked about this a while ago. I said I would lead Segura off. You remember when I went back and looked at his best numbers in Seattle? It was as the leadoff hitter. They might have found something with Segura in the leadoff spot here. He was 4 for 6 last night with 4 runs scored. What do you want from your leadoff man? Get on base and score runs. Segura's having an unbelievable season. He should make the All-Star game, by the way. He's hitting .330, and his on-base percentage is .383. He's having an unbelievable season, Segura. I'd keep him right there in the leadoff spot. I like what they've done now. They put him in the leadoff spot out of necessity because Girardi said yesterday that he was sitting Herrera for the next couple days because he thinks he's hit a little bit of a wall. Well, what happens when you sat Herrera? You don't have another leadoff guy. You don't want to go back to McCutchen there because McCutchen has kind of found a little spot deeper in the lineup. So they took my advice and went with Segura. Thank you very much, Joe Girardi. I appreciate you listening. This advice is free. The next time I'm going to charge. My next advice will be get Howard into your bullpen and pair him up with Velasquez. Get those 2 guys in your awful bullpen. I don't think he's going to listen to me on those two. Just a hunch. But he did listen to me on Segura. Segura led off last night. I like that. Real Muto in the 2-hole. I don't have a huge problem with that, although Real Muto has not been as good as you had hoped. 259. I like to see that up around 280, 285 for Real Muto. Harper has been phenomenal recently in that spot, and he was tremendous last night. I don't love McCutchen in the 4-hole. I mean, he hits grand slam last night. I get it. The power numbers have been there, but I don't love McCutchen in that spot. Ideally, you'd like to see him a little down in the lineup, but I get it. I'll give Hoskins some credit. He's swinging a hot bat right now. DD struggled last night. He's down to 224. Bohm struggled too, 0 for 5 last night. I don't know what they're going to do with Bohm. I don't know what you do with him right now. I mean, defensively, he's horrible. He's not hitting the ball. I mean, he kind of hit the ball in June, but it didn't do much for the batting average. It didn't do much for the slugging percentage. He's struggling, man. There's no two ways about it. And I like Bohm, but hey, he's been disappointing. And by the way, the kid Jankowski, I say kid, he's a little older, but I mean, he's played pretty well. Give him credit. In some limited time, he's come up. He scored 2 runs last night. He had a hit, 346, on base, 369. So the lineup is deeper. Now, when Herrera comes back, I would imagine you see Herrera jump in the spot. I think they stick with Segura in the leadoff spot. And I would imagine they go Segura, Real Muto, Harper, McCutchen, Hoskins, and maybe you think about putting Herrera in the spot behind Hoskins, and then, they were hitting Bohm 8. You're going to move Bohm down and put him in the 8 spot and have Herrera. Then you're going to, back-to-back lefties there. You'd like to break those lefties up if you can. That's why you think maybe you go Hoskins, Herrera, Bohm, Gregorius, or maybe you have Herrera go back to the 8 spot. I mean, it's not like Herrera is ripping the cover off the ball. He's hitting like 250-something. Very streaky, yes. Agree. So there's the Phillies scored 15 runs last night. Nothing. They scored 15 runs. They got 4 on a grand slam. They got 3 on a 3-run homer. So that's 7 runs off homers last night. 8 runs on homers because Hoskins hit a solo bomb. So you got 8 runs on homers last night, which means you scored 7 more runs without the home run last night. It's a good night for the offense there. Now you're facing Arrieta, who absolutely stinks. I mean, he gave up 6 hits, 7 runs last night in an inning and 2/3, and they tried their damnedest to try to sneak him through. They couldn't get him through one more inning. I mean, one more out. They had to get him out. And they tried and tried and tried. They couldn't do it. And you know what's funny? Last night during the broadcast, the kid Williams came in, and right when Kruk says, man, this guy Williams has come in and done a pretty good job, he gave up a bomb. He gave up an absolute Titanic shot last night. You know who I would take, though, if I'm the Phillies? I'd call up the Cubs and say, hey, what can I do to get, and this is where you got to start thinking about the trade deadline. What can I do to try to get somebody off that roster, okay? I'm looking up and down that roster. Who can help me on that team? Well, we know Chris Bryant is the one name that is most likely, because the Cubs have got to be in sell mode now almost, right? So I'm calling the Cubs, and I'm looking through their bullpen. And you know what is an interesting possibility? They've got Rizzo playing first base, so I don't think Hoskins makes a lot of sense for them. But this is a team, the Chicago Cubs. Now, Buster Olney wrote today that he thinks the Phillies have to consider trading Wheeler. And I don't think I agree with that. But the question would be, if I'm looking at that Cubs team, I got to look into that bullpen and say, hey, how about Kimbrel? Is he a guy that you are willing to deal? The problem I have is, how do I get Kimbrel? Kimbrel was terrible. He came back last year, right? Was that last year that he came back? He made it to the playoffs. It was terrible, wasn't he? Was that 2 years ago with he was pitching in the playoffs for somebody and was just horrible in the it was with the Red Sox in 2018. When remember he couldn't get anybody out. The 2 years in Boston in the playoffs, he was horrible. So you do have to wonder whether or not postseason-wise, if he's the guy. But now he's 33 years old. You don't know how much left in him, but he's having a pretty damn good year this year. 0.59 ERA and .65 whip. So if you're the Phillies and you want to make the playoffs this year, you look at that Cubs team and say, what do I got to give you to get Kimbrel? The problem I think the Phillies have is they don't really have a guy in the farm system. You're giving up somebody for a 33-year-old. Do you have someone on your current roster? Probably not. But is this a situation, all right, where you call the Cubs and you're like, listen, we just played you. I mean, we just beat you 3 out of 4. We just swept you. You guys are 9 games out of the Central right now. You're sellers, right? You're sellers. What do we got to give you? I mean, do you entice them with, I don't know, do you say, is Spencer Howard too much? Are you ready to give up on Spencer Howard? Or are you saying, no, I'm not giving up Spencer Howard for a 33-year-old guy? I'd probably side with that. But is there somebody else on your roster? You know, can you do something like, oh, man. I mean, see, Kimbrel makes sense because he's a closer. You target teams who have good closers on bad teams is the point, right? Bad teams don't need a good closer. And I think the Cubs, as they keep losing, they're 9 back. You just keep falling further and further. You got to think about selling. So right now, if you're Philly, you're looking at that Cubs roster and being like, all right, Kimbrel, all right, okay. Can we make a deal for Kimbrel? And then it goes back to what we've been talking about. The Phillies don't have assets to trade to get players like that. That's where their depth in the farm system or their lack thereof really hurts. I was thinking about this last night. I said, who can you trade for on this team? And Chris Bryant is likely going to be traded. Are you ready to say you're done with Bohm? Probably not. I would say definitively not. I don't think the Phillies are just going to pull the plug on him. He was the 3rd pick in the draft who has shown he can swing the bat. Last season, he did a very good job hitting. Now, defensively, he struggles a bit, no question about it. Well, can I move him in a position? Well, if I bring Chris Bryant in here, I probably have to move him to another position. So this is an interesting series because of the fact that you keep beating the Cubs, you put them in a situation where they have to sell. And they have some things that you might need. 609-403-0973. Cole from LBI says, please sweep the Cubs. Cole, I think every Phillies fan's agreeing. And I think they need to sweep the Cubs here. Just to show, hey, you got to win with Zach Wheeler on the mound. Have to. Can't lose tonight's game. Yeah, Kimbrel, and that, if you remember in the postseason, that was the year I think Kimbrel sat out in the beginning of the year, and then they brought him on, and he was terrible in the playoffs. And with the Cubs in 2020, he was awful last season in that shortened season. Now, he's been great this year, so he's a tough guy to think about. But I was going through teams that are like, all right, who has a closer, right? Who's a team that has a good closer on a bad team? And they're one of them. They are definitively one of them. You know, them, you've got, Kimbrel, it's funny too, because they were just in this thing. It's amazing. They've lost 11 in a row. I can't believe it. You've got him. You've got St. Louis with Reyes. They're 8.5 back. I mean, I guess they're kind of in it, maybe, but I would imagine they're kind of further out of it than in it. And then the next closer that's on a bad team, you got to go to Texas, and that would be Ant Kennedy is their closer. I mean, they're the worst team, one of the worst teams in baseball. So that's another team that has a good closer on a bad team. Another team, I guess, that fits that mold would be Colorado with Daniel Bard. I don't look at him, though, as a guy that I have to have. He's a Hector Neris type. So the two teams is the Cubs, maybe St. Louis, and Texas that I'm kind of targeting. But you can help yourself out, right? You can help yourself out by beating this team for the next two nights. Because you beat this team for the next two nights, I think you're in a spot now where they have to sell. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan, the all-new Matt Blatt Nissan. Now open, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, mattblattnissan.com. Coming up on the show today, Mike McGarry comes up in about 20 minutes. And Jeff Mosher, Football at 4. We are 2 weeks away from training camp opening. Plus another edition of the Rank Report tonight with Todd Rank at 5. And Jeff Kerr talks some more NFL tonight at 5:25. But coming up, speaking of the Eagles, what did Doug Peterson have to say today? Something pretty interesting about Jalen Hurts. You'll hear it coming up next. All right, Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. You can hit us up on the text board, 609-403-0973. Jake and EHT, why would someone think of giving up Wheeler? I agree with that comment. I don't know why they would suggest giving up Wheeler. And I'll read the part Buster Olney wrote about it. I think you're suggesting giving up Wheeler because if you don't think you're in it. And his point is that he offers the biggest return for a team that needs help. Believe it or not, the Phillies farm system isn't very good the last time we checked. Who can get you the most in return? I've said Rhys Hoskins. I think Rhys Hoskins doesn't give you as big as a return as Wheeler does, no question. Let me get the article from Buster Olney here. Now, they mentioned the Cubs, and they said the Cubs could move Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, Peterson, and, of course, Kimbrel. So that group of guys from the Cubs. Now, this is what he wrote about Philadelphia. He said, you assume that some team would ask the Phillies if they are interested in talking about Zach Wheeler. And Philadelphia would be crazy not to explore the possibility of what the return for Wheeler would be. Now, for the record, he mentions John Middleton declared during the winter he would not trade Wheeler for Babe Ruth. So let's assume that Wheeler is not getting traded. But his point is that Philadelphia would be crazy to not explore the possibility of what a return would be for Zach Wheeler. So, and we'll talk about this with McGarry in about 12 minutes. Like, if you're the Phillies, right? If you're the Phillies, do you have to consider trading Zach Wheeler? Or is that just completely off the table? Because I think, oh, man, Wheeler to me, I love the signing when they got him. I was a big fan of the signing because I thought Wheeler, and it's funny, the Met fans are like, you're going to love him. Yeah, right. No, Wheeler had great stuff. He was hurt a lot. And that's concerning, but you could always see that he had great stuff. And I think that he has been a great addition for them. The problem is he also gets you your biggest return. 609-403-0973. So Jake and EHT, why would someone think of giving up Wheeler? It's the return. You don't want to give up Wheeler, but I need to change my franchise. I need more depth in my organization. Who gets me the most? Zach Wheeler. Mike, any interest in Richard Rodriguez from the Pirates? Yeah, there's some interest there, I guess. I mean, it's not like I'm like, you got to go out and get this guy, but guess what? The problem that you have right now is that any bullpen arm is better than what you have. Any bullpen arm. And Rodriguez is having a good year. He fits the mold. He is a closer on a bad team. So, yeah, he fits the mold of a guy I would have interest in. He's older, though. He's 31. It's not like he's some young guy. So I'm not giving up a lot to get him. And the problem is the Pirates want young guys, and you don't have them. So, yeah, I have interest in that if I'm getting him for, I don't know, who am I giving up to give up? I mean, they want young prospect for Richard Rodriguez. Why? They have the best – they have a great situation if you're Pittsburgh. I have a closer who's pitching well on a team that doesn't need a closer. So what does that mean? You need to give me something in return that I want if you want this guy. And the Phillies don't have it. So, yeah, to answer the guy's question, and I appreciate the text message, I have interest in Richard Rodriguez, but I can't put a deal together to get him here. Outside, we want to get, hey, you want Mickey Moniak? No. If you're getting Richard Rodriguez, you're probably having to give up a guy like Spencer Howard, Bryson Stott. You're not doing that. They're the two young guys you have in your farm system that almost anybody would want. You have some guys in single A that are intriguing, but I don't think you want to give that up for a journeyman bullpen guy who's happened to be having a good year. Now, the other question that he asked is, what about John Gray from Colorado. John Gray, a starting pitcher, he's been okay this year. He's definitely better than Matt Moore, Chase Anderson, and Vinny Velasquez. No question about that. The number's probably inflated because he's in Colorado. He's been a guy who's an innings eater. So, yeah, what am I giving up to get John Gray? He's a good pitcher on a bad team. What am I giving up to get him? Well, it goes back to the same problem. They're a bad team that has a good pitcher. What does that mean? Well, you got to give me something if you want them. So the two guys you mentioned, Richard Rodriguez from the Pirates and John Gray from Colorado, sure, I'm interested, but I don't know how to get them. Mike, the Phillies are not a closer away from making the playoffs. They're a terrible defensive team. Their bullpen is terrible. They strike out too many guys in the lineup. They are not making the playoffs. I don't disagree with any of that. However, they're 4 games out, and the biggest problem they have is the closer in their bullpen. Yes, their bullpen is not good. But Dave Dombrowski is going to have to look at this and say, this is the problem. You're looking at it in a sense of they're not good enough. He has to look at it in a sense that I can't strip this team down. I have too many high-priced veterans. I can't trade Bryce Harper. I can't trade JT Realmuto. So I have to try to go for it. If I have a chance, I have to try to go for it. Now, if you thought about it in that sense, what you're saying is not wrong. Of course they're not a closer away from making the playoffs. But if they get a closer, I hate to tell you, they have a shot. If their offense is healthy and their starting pitching is good enough, if they don't blow 22 games already, blown saves, they're in first place by 10 games. So if they have a competent closer, yeah, they are good enough to make the playoffs. That doesn't mean their bullpen's good, but you're obviously not thinking about it in that aspect. Another text. The Phillies should be sellers. What kind of, seriously, I feel like people who say this just have no clue about baseball trades. What are you getting? What are you getting? Segura, McCutchen have value in what world, dude? Do you watch sports? No, I see your text message number. Now I realize who it is. No, you don't watch sports. Segura has no value. McCutchen has even less value. They have no value, those two guys. Zero value. They're not getting anything of value for those two players. So if you're saying they should be sellers, you're living in a fantasy world. You're not getting anything for Segura or McCutchen. Nothing of value. Nothing, zero. Nobody is giving you anything for Gene Segura. I know he's having a great year. No one's giving you anything for Segura, and no one's giving you anything for McCutchen. Nothing. So the Phillies should be sellers. The problem is they're not in position to sell because they don't have anything of value. Gene Segura is 31 years old, who's making $14 million next year. Yeah, someone will take him off your hands, but they're not giving you anything for him. Come on, man. You have to know that. And if you don't know that, then come on. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. We'll ask Mike McGarry about it. Plus, I'll ask Mike, do the Phillies have to consider trading Wheeler, as Buster Olney suggested? 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. I feel like baseball, you just throw out random stuff. Oh, you got to be a seller. Of course the Phillies should sell. They have nothing to sell. Nobody wants Gene Segura. Nobody wants McCutchen. If you don't want them and you think they should sell them, you think somebody else is going to be like, oh, let me restock your farm system. Give me your 32-year-old second baseman and your even older outfielder. Yeah, that's just what teams are going to do. Let me give you let me rebuild your farm system. But can you please include your 35-year-old left fielder who's hitting .230? Yeah, that'll go over well. Seriously, do you think before you hit send on that? Yeah, Andrew McCutchen. Hey, If you guys have a 34-year-old outfielder hitting 233 we can have, I have a top-level prospect I'm ready to give you. Yeah, that's exactly how that phone call is going to go. Oh, and by the way, do you have a 31-year-old second baseman making $14 million next year you could throw into? Because I have another top-level prospect I'm ready to give you. Like, what kind of fantasy world are you living in there, bud? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. McGarry's up next. All right, welcome back. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Now, I know that people like to make up trades, and it's like, hey, but Brad Miller, somebody texted in, Brad Miller's a veteran who hit 30 homers in the past. Brad Miller and another player and a pick for a closer. You can't trade picks in baseball. That's number one. Number two, no one's giving you a closer for Brad Miller because he hit 30 home runs with the Rays a couple of years ago. I hate to break it to you. Mike McGarry from the West of Atlantic City. I don't know. Baseball trades are an interesting thing. It's like, hey, this guy's having a good year, so try to trade him. That's not really how this works, right? Like Gene Segura is having a great year. You're not getting anything of value for him that's going to change your franchise. Like, it's not going to deepen your minor league system by trading the McCutchens and the Gene Seguras, the Didi Gregoriuses of the world. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. I think if you trade veterans like that, at the best, you're going to get back a prospect who is in A-ball right now. You're not trading Gene Segura or Andrew McCutchen for a AAA player who's going to come into your lineup next year and play a position for the next 5 to 6 years. So you're right about that when you trade some veterans. I do think, however, that the Phillies, I'm a guy who thinks the Phillies should sell. And what I mean by that is I think they should look at breaking up the core of their team, because I do think they do have some players who are valuable in that core who can possibly bring back something.
Well, I agree. Like, if you say, should the Phillies be buyers or sellers? They're 4 back right now, all right? Is this team good enough? No, their bullpen's not very good. They don't play very good defense. The problem is selling. You're just selling just to break up the core, not to restock.
Well, I'd be selling because I think, what we've seen for 3.5 years is what we have now. And that is a team that is basically around 500, that hangs on the periphery of the playoff race. And every once in a while teases us the way they're teasing us this week. They look like the 1927 Yankees out there against the reeling Chicago Cubs, right? And everybody can get excited, take 2 of 3 from the Pirates, from the Padres rather, take the first 2 in Chicago. Hey, it's 4 of the last 5, lineups back together, double-digit runs, away we go. I think this is just another tease. I think they have long-term questions that cannot be answered. At best right now, if the Phillies stay the same right now, to me, what they're hoping for is, you hope that Bryce Harper has a year like he had in 2015, and you hope that everybody else has a career year, and then you're the 1993 Phils, and you make a run like that. But that had no staying power. So if you want staying power, I think you've got to break up the core of the team.
Yeah, I look, in a perfect world, I agree. The problem is, it's hard to say to Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, who you just signed to these big contracts, hey, we're going to strip. I think they're in an unenviable task here of, we've signed these 2 guys, so we can't go down to the bottom. So they try to fix this thing on the fly. They just don't have the pieces. Buster only suggested today that they should listen on calls for Zach Wheeler. Is he a guy that they should consider trading?
I listen. When I talk about the core of the team, I think that the players that have the most value on the core of the team would be the starting pitchers. If I was them, I'd listen on all 3 pitchers, Nola, Eflin, and Wheeler. And let's face facts, Zach Wheeler's value is never going to be higher than it is right now. He is arguably the best pitcher in the National League. I know people talk about Jacob deGrom, who, by the way, just gave up a home run about 20 minutes ago. But if you look at their Junes, since June 1st, I think Zach Wheeler had allowed 5 earned runs in like 39 innings. DeGrom had allowed 5 earned runs in 34 innings. So Wheeler has been better than DeGrom since June 1st. He's been more durable. His value is never going to be higher than it right now. So if you really want to try to turn this around quick, and you're exactly right, they're in a spot where they can't go on like a 5-year rebuilding program, right? Because of Realmuto, because of Harper. And you couldn't even trade those guys if you wanted to, with Harper's contract and probably Realmuto's also. So the guys you would have to flip and do it quickly, where maybe you take a mini step backwards in 2022, but then you're ready to reload in 2023, would be those 3 starting pitchers.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that, yes, Wheeler gets you the most back in return. Nola would be next, and obviously Eflin would get you a little bit lower. The Harper thing, you can't trade him. You can't trade JT Realmuto. Hoskins would be the position player that would likely get you the biggest return. The problem the Phillies have is the rest of their position players are older guys who aren't going to get you much back. So that's where they're kind of in this limbo thing where, all right, if we trade these pitchers, we're still stuck with this older core in the lineup. So they're kind of like in a no-win situation.
Yeah, well, here's if you trade, this is why if you try to tweak around the edges, right? If you don't go all the way in, if you trade McCutchen and trade Segura, you're not solving any of your long-term issues, which they have long-term. They have a long-term issue at first base. They have a long-term issue at third base. They have a long-term issue in left field. They have a long-term issue in center field. Who's playing those positions 3 years from now, 4 years from now? No idea, basically. So that's the issue. So I think if you are going to sell, you really have to sell, because to sell Andrew McCutchen or Gene Segura, that's not solving anything. You might as well keep those guys and hope that you get hot the second half of the season and you can become the 93 Phils.
Well, right, Mike, they're trying to serve two masters here. They're trying to, that's why earlier I said, hey, look, you're playing the Cubs. If you sweep the Cubs, you've put the Cubs completely out. I mean, they'd be like 11 games out if they lose this series, if they get swept. That's when the Phillies might say, hey, you've got a 33-year-old closer. That would help us in the immediacy. The problem is the Phillies don't have anything to give up to get a player like that.
Right.
Kimbrel, they're going to want something of value, and the Phillies don't have a young player of value to make that type of move. That's the problem they have. So they can't fix – if they just say – we want to make the playoffs this year through hell or high water. We don't care if we get knocked out in the wild card. We just want. Well, they're not going to be the wild card team. They're way out of that.
Right. It's got a division or bust.
Right. If we want to win this division, we got to go for it. Let's get a closer. If they don't blow 22 saves, they'd be up in the division by 10 games already. So do they just say, let's go out and get a closer and see if in the second half we can overtake the Mets?
Well, you're absolutely right in the fact that they don't have anything to offer out of their minor leagues. The one weapon they do have is money, right? So they could say to a team like the Cubs and say, look, you don't want to pay, you're out of it. You don't want to pay Craig Kimbrel whatever he's making the rest of the season. We'll take that $8, $9, $10 million off your hands. That's where they can add payroll. That's where they can make a move. Because you're right, they don't have any minor. People talk about buyers or sellers. They don't have anything to buy with player-wise. They don't have any prospects in the minor leagues that they can afford to trade away. So they're one place where they're strong is they can say, hey, you got this overpaid guy. You're out of it. You don't want him anymore. We'll take that on. But again, look, a lot of people talk, and this could be famous last words, come back and bite me here, but 4.5 games, people talk like that's a pretty substantial lead for baseball. I mean, think about, the Phillies have won, 4 of the last 5. They haven't really picked up any ground on the Mets, who have won 3 of their last 4. You're 4.5, 5 back. Not every year is 2007 where you're 7 back with 17 to play and the Mets collapse. So you got to be somewhat realistic about this also.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I agree that the 40, like as you mentioned, and I said the other day, you're not making the wild card. You're not catching San Diego or the Dodgers. You're out of that. You've got to win the division. You got to figure out a way to catch the Mets. The Mets are going to make a move. Would you agree with that? That's going to improve their team.
Yes, I would agree that the Mets would make a move to bolster their starting pitching. And also, people got to remember, too, is the Mets have hardly played because of the way their schedule just unfolded. They had a lot of postponements. Remember, in the beginning of the year, they had that COVID thing with the Nationals. The Mets have only played 36, 37 home games. They've got a lot of home games left to play, and the schedule is kind of favorable for them. I know they finish up the first half with the Pirates and then start the second half with the Pirates. So, they've got a lot of factors in there sort of favor the Mets. So, you hear the Phillies say one good week this, one good week that. Yeah, I guess anything's possible in baseball. The Phillies could go 7-0, the Mets could go 0-7. But that doesn't – the other thing I think you got to keep in mind, and Atlanta's kind of struggled and Washington's kind of scuffling, but they're right there with the Phillies. So it's not like it's the Phillies just having the Mets in the crosshairs. Washington and Atlanta are going to have to be contended with too. So the Phillies got to worry. You're really competing. It's basically 4 teams for one spot. It's just not 2 for 1.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. But the Phillies do have a shot when they come out of this break. If they can sweep the Cubs here, and they got Boston for 3, they got to get 1 in that Boston series. That would get them right around 500. And then they jump out and they basically have 4 with the Braves, 4 with the Nationals. They play the Pirates in there, then 4 with the Nationals again. So they're going to have division games. They're going to have a shot to do something here. But I'd look. to me, this team is in no man's land. That's their issue. They're in no man's land. All these people texted, trade Segura. That you're not fixing your problems. You're just clearing a guy out. Fine. But don't think that you're going to get somebody that's going to help the organization get better because you traded a player who's having an all-star caliber season. That's not how baseball trades work.
Right. You're not fixing the problems that you have by trading Segura or McCutchen. What you will be doing, and if you want to do this, fine, is maintaining the status quo. Like I said, hope Bryce Harper gets hot the second half of the year. Hope as a team you can catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe the Mets falter. Boom, you're in the postseason. But two questions there. Does anybody think if they get to the postseason, what are they doing in the postseason? How far are they going to go? And what changes next year? If they make the playoffs, are they a team that's put themselves in position to make a playoff run 3-4 years in a row?
I will say this, Mike, if they get into a playoff with Wheeler, Nola, and Eflin, they do have a little bit because the starting pitching is much more important. That if they could get a bullpen piece, now their bullpen's still a disaster. They need 3 bullpen pieces. But if they have those 3 starting pitchers and I'm saying if they were able to somehow get a closer to help this team out, then with those 3 starting pitchers, you're at least interesting in a playoff series.
Yeah, you're interesting. But one thing I would say is check out how, and this is the other thing that kind of I'd be arguing against myself here if I'm trying to deal him. But, Nola's stats the past, check out his last 5 or 6 starts. Of course, he had that start up at Citi Field where he struck out 10 in a row and tied Seaver's record. But other than that, he's struggled, and he struggled a little bit last night. So it's 5 out of his last 6 starts. He struggled. Eflin hasn't been great, but I still think those guys have some value. So it's really been to me, and look, I'm not saying they got to go in and strip it down and become, the Kansas City Royals or the Pittsburgh Pirates and go off wandering in the desert for 5 years to try to rebuild. I think I would, if I was them, I'd think about breaking up the core and trading some guys in hopes that you could reload quickly and maybe take a step backwards in 2022, but come back in 2023 ready to compete and and be able to sustain that sort of contention for a couple of seasons.
Yeah, by the way, McCutchen, his deal is up after this year. So, you could try to just move him out. The problem becomes, all right, do we want to try to make the playoffs or not? Okay, they probably do. And if they don't, okay, McCutchen's gone. His money's off the books. They might rather go that route than just giving McCutchen up for a single guy.
Well, and that gives me, that points to the argument of kind of breaking it up, right? Because now you got to go find a left fielder, right? So suppose you would say Michael Conforto having an offseason this year for the Mets, but he's a free agent. Suppose you go out and sign Michael Conforto for $25 million a year and you put him in left field. Does anybody think, does that make you a playoff team? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. So it's almost like the problems can't be solved. The left field problem, the center field problem. Who's playing? The guy at third base can't field a ground ball. The guy at first base is a defensive issue also. These are big problems that have to be solved. And, you're not going to solve them just by trying to bring in free agents and things like that. I think you have to think about breaking up the core of the team to, again, try to take a step forward.
Mike McGarry's must-win column appears Fridays in the Press of Atlantic City. AC Press McGarry on Twitter. And the Phillies and the Cubs finish up tonight and tomorrow, and then they'll play Boston before they go into the All-Star break.
And have them show me something against Boston. The Cubs are reeling and getting ready to trade everybody. Go into Boston and take 2 out of 3, and then maybe we'll take this thing a little seriously.
They got Jake Pavetta's in the rotation there. They'll face him in the second game of that series. All right, Mike, we'll talk to you Friday, pal.
All right, we'll see you later. Thanks.
All right, Mike McGarry's right. I said it the other day. You got to sweep this Cubs series, and then you got to try to figure out at least a way to get a game there, get yourself to 500, and then we'll start talking about after the All-Star break, the trade deadline and how it can help this team out, or selling, which this team just can't sell because selling isn't going to help fix things. That's the problem. What did Doug Peterson say? I got that next. 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. It's a Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill. Don't forget, football at 4 today. We're going to get into some NFL stuff right now. We'll further it with Moshe at 4 o'clock. Jeff Kerr tonight at 5:25. Doug Peterson was speaking today on Sirius XM NFL radio and said something interesting to say, but I want to start with a tweet from Darius Slay that maybe has everybody's eyebrows raised. Go to 973ESPN.com to get more details. But so I'm going through Twitter today and this morning, getting ready for the show, putting together a couple of segments that I like to talk about, and I see a tweet from Darius Slay. And I said, this is kind of interesting here. So Darius Slay, who obviously the biggest story that still needs to be figured out is who is going to start opposite Darius Slay. That is pretty much the one spot on the field that we have no idea who will start there, right? We have no idea who's going to play opposite Darius Slay. The one name that keeps coming up is Steven Nelson. He has not signed with a team since being released by the Steelers back in March. It was a salary cap dump. But it seems that Slay is at least recruiting Nelson. If Howie Roseman hasn't made the call, Slay is at least going out of his way to let Nelson know, hey, I'd like to be teammates with you. He went to Twitter on Tuesday evening and sent a tweet at Nelson and said, that green will look good on you, in reference to, of course, the midnight green color of the jerseys of the Eagles. Nelson replied, it could all be so simple, my man. Now, I don't know that there's a whole lot there that suggests that, hey, Nelson's saying, don't worry, this thing's going to happen pretty soon. But I guess that means Nelson would be somewhat intrigued by the advance from Darius Slay. This is what we live in the world in 2021. One corner tweets at another corner and says, hey, that green jersey would look good on you. The other corner responds, it could be so simple. And now, all of a sudden, the speculation. So here's the problem. The Eagles, there have been reports that have linked the Eagles to Nelson, right? The one issue would be Nelson last year made $8.5 million. I think that's the number that he made in Pittsburgh. The Eagles probably don't have $8.5 million left to spend unless they cut ties with Zach Ertz. Now, that's where this story gets a little bit more interesting. Because if you heard anything this morning regarding Zach Ertz, it sounds as if Ertz is planning on reporting to camp when they get to camp in 2 weeks. All the speculation today is that Zach Ertz plans on being there. So now you throw that wrinkle into the mix, right? It's like, hey, Zach, well, not so fast, my friends. So if the Eagles can figure out a way to clear out cap space, it almost feels like the Eagles have reached out to Steven Nelson and were like, listen, let us try to figure out a way to get rid of Ertz before you do something. Because you could come here and you could start right away, right? You just wait for us. We'll figure this out. And we can have a situation where you step right in, you're the starting corner, no questions asked, boom, period, point blank. Is it that easy? Is it that simple? Probably not. But one thing's for sure, when you look at the Eagles' corners, Kayvon Seymour, Avonte Maddox, Craig James, Zech McPherson, Michael Jacquet, Darius Slay knows they need help on the other side. He knows so much that he's going out on Twitter trying to recruit Steven Nelson. Hey, don't sign anybody yet. These green jerseys would look pretty good on you, man. So will Howie Roseman make the call to Steven Nelson? According to some reports, he already has. They were one of 14 teams reportedly interested in him a couple of weeks ago. according to Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN. But Nelson hasn't signed with anybody yet. You're wondering what's taking so long for Steven Nelson. And Nelson last year, look, he was the 36th corner according to Pro Football Focus last year. So, look, are they winning the Super Bowl if they sign Steven Nelson? Most likely not. It certainly adds some more intrigue to the team. Speaking of intrigue with the team, last year they took Jalen Hurts in the second round of the draft. That added intrigue, right? Well, today, Doug Peterson made it clear in a radio appearance on Sirius XM's NFL radio in an interview, basically suggesting that, look, this move was not meant to undermine Carson Wentz. He made it clear that they did not bring him in for Carson Wentz, but something that we suggested last year when they drafted Jalen Hurts. Why? Now, Peterson doesn't have any reason to really sugarcoat it at this point, but all right, Doug Peterson, I'll play along. Why did the team bring in Jalen Hurts? He has an opportunity to really clear the air here. This is what he said.
Into drafts and you go into each year looking for quarterbacks, and we continue to look for quarterbacks, and that's always something that will never change. That we won a Super Bowl with our backup quarterback, and we've had to play with our backup a couple of times in Philadelphia, and so we did that a year ago and brought in Jalen Hurts, and not to undermine Carson Wentz, not to do anything to take away his job or anything, because Carson was definitely our starter. He was the franchise and all of that moving forward. But someone that could come in and be the backup and learn how to play the NFL game, bring his talent to the Philadelphia Eagles. And
that was Doug Peterson on Sirius XM NFL radio. And he, a lot of references to we had to do this, and kind of sounded as if he was still the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. But, the one thing that is interesting about that, he went out of his way to say, look, Carson was the franchise guy. This guy was not brought in here to take over his job. We didn't draft him. We did not draft Jalen Hurts to undermine Carson Wentz. Peterson mentions, he says, you go into drafts and you go into each year looking for quarterbacks. And we continue to look for quarterbacks. And that's always something that will never change. So he's still speaking as if he's a part of the organization, like, hey, that's not changing. We're going to continue to do that. Though he knows the Eagles organization, and that's their plan, is we're going to always try to find a quarterback. Why? Because we value it, and we value what we can get in return. So, in other words, if they don't draft Jalen Hurts last year, where are they now? They're probably still stuck with Carson Wentz. I don't want to say stuck, but Carson Wentz is likely the quarterback here if they don't draft Jalen Hurts last year. Now, you would say, we didn't need Jalen Hurts. The Eagles would say, we didn't need him, but look what we got because Wentz struggled. We found out that Wentz wasn't the guy we thought he was, and we got a very good return in trading him. So in the end, did drafting Jalen Hurts actually make sense? Some people would say, no, you could have got a safety. Jeremy Chin, was a safety really helping the Eagles last year? Or did the return that you got for Carson Wentz help this team more? Peterson went on to say, we won a Super Bowl with our backup quarterback. They value the backup quarterback position. He goes on to say something about the fact that the season starts to spiral out of control.
And then just really as the season began, things just started to kind of, spiral out of control. Injuries began to set in. We weren't playing very well. Turnovers offensively, just a number of things, penalties, more injuries, compounded problems. And it just became harder and harder as the year wore on.
So he mentions in that comment right there, we weren't playing very well. Things are spiraling out of control. Injuries began to set in. One. Then he says a number of things, this, that, more injuries. He goes to the injury situation multiple times, and he says it just became harder and harder as the year went on. So it's clear to me that Doug Peterson feels like, yeah, we weren't playing well, but injuries set in, then more injuries set in, that he puts injuries high atop that list as to why his team struggled last year. More from Peterson.
No one or no one person or is to blame for any of what happened last year. And I was just, it was just unfortunate for me because I was hoping to really have an opportunity to fix the issues that we had and kind of get everything back on track, whether it was going to be this year or the next year. And obviously that didn't happen. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the ifs, ands, and buts. I just focus on the future and look forward to that.
So he mentions, I thought I was going to have the chance to come back and fix that this year or next year. So is Peterson suggesting that he doesn't think this Eagles team is so far off, that he could have just, hey, we had the injury problems last year, and then, look, I could have fixed the problems that we had, that nobody was really getting past the injury problems that we had this past season? 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Hit me up on the text board. You hear from Doug Peterson right there. Did Doug Peterson kind of indicate that he thought that this team was fixable? He did mention that he is interested in getting back into coaching. It's something that he said he would do. A lot of people have speculated, but last week he was in Philly for a golf event, and he did make it clear that he would like to coach again. But in this interview today, he kind of mentioned what he thought was wrong with the Eagles, which was injuries, turnovers, penalties, more injuries. I think that injury thing is something, I ask a lot. The fact of, did the Eagles stink because their roster's not very good, or did the Eagles stink because of injury? And I think the answer to that question is, it's got to be clear. Vegas had them winning 10 games. The over-under was 10. They won 4. Vegas thought they'd win 10. They won 4. Why did that happen? What made them go from what was perceived to be a 10-win roster to a 4-win roster? Was Vegas that wrong? That doesn't happen too often. They're not just that wrong. 6 games off. 609-403-0973. Some quick injury news in the NBA Finals. I'm going to get into the finals coming up here in just a second. Dario Saric has sustained a torn ACL. He is out. So Dario is done for Phoenix in the series. Speaking of the series, which last night we talked about a lot in the regular season with Ben Simmons, how he controls the pace and the flow of games. You got a glimpse of last night, what controlling the pace and the flow of a game means to a team. And Chris Paul last night absolutely dominated the pace and the flow of the game. We'll get into the NBA Finals coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Also, Jeff Mosher has football at 4. We'll ask him about Darius Slay's tweet, and we'll ask him about Jalen Hurts moving forward. Todd Rank tonight. Rank, we were tomorrow we're going to do a segment on the Home Run Derby. We got a little fun thing planned for that tomorrow on the show. But I want to get Rank's take. He's a West Coast guy. Are we underappreciating the fact that Shohei Ohtani is currently a major leaguer on the East Coast? I want to get that thought from Rank in this week's Rank Rant coming up tonight at 5. 3:20 on a Wednesday. I'm Mike Gill, Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Make sure you download the app. Get it on your phone, wherever you check out your apps in the Apple Store, the Android, Google Play. Or just go to 973ESPN.com/app. Mike Gill with you till 6 o'clock tonight. Chris Paul last night showed you everything, that you hope from someone who controls the pace and tempo of the game, and he did it in a variety of ways. He did it with scoring. He did it with he yo-yoed them to death last night. 32 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists. I thought that Paul really dictated the entire game. And whatever the defense tried to do to him, it wasn't good enough because he just figures out a way to say, you're going to do this, and I'll do that. You do this, and I'll do this. He carved the Bucks last night, whose defense, they tried. How many times the Bucks started switching the pick and roll right off the bat, which is a little bit of a surprise. But the duo of Paul and Booker last night, they saw it. They took the bait and said, all right, you want to isolate me against Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis? No problem. Budenholzer said after the game, in the most obvious quote of the series so far, quote, their pick and roll game is tough to guard. Yeah, you think? Especially if you're trying to do it with Brook Lopez. Milwaukee then went to their traditional drop coverage, and Chris Paul was foaming at the mouth when he saw that. You can't do that with a guy who can hit the mid-range jumper. And that's the problem. When you take a look at a guy like Ben Simmons, you can't do that with him. Everything he has to do is getting to the basket area. That's obvious. Chris Paul is an old school kind of guard. He's an old school kind of guy that still takes the 2-pointer at the foul line. And, he was just the point guard extraordinaire last night. And then 27 points from Devin Booker doesn't hurt. And I thought, now this isn't like earth-shattering, but I thought that Chris Paul, the way that he dictated the pace of that game was the total difference maker. But I will add this. The fact of the matter that the Phoenix Suns, the way they can, first off, they have Booker who can score. He scored 27 last night. We're not even really looking at him, right? He's not even the story in the game last night, scoring 27 points. But what they're able to do with the depth that they have with Booker, who scores 27, Paul, who scores 32, but Cameron Payne, I thought, played 17 great minutes last night. He came in and gave them an energy, man, off the bench in that late third quarter, early fourth, I think it was. He hit that long three. He had that streaking layup. Cameron Payne's a guy who's going to make some money in free agency. I tweeted this out earlier today. He just feels like the kind of guy that Daryl Morey will figure out a way to get him here. I don't know what he'll do. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, that's the kind of guy that, I recognize that guy. He's not getting enough playing time there. If he plays on my team, he'll be a star. Like, that kind of guy. They just got some nice pieces. Cam Johnson, who came off the bench and scored 10 for them last night. But their starters are the story. 27 from Booker, 32 from Paul, and then DeAndre Ayton has turned into a difference maker. All of a sudden, he has turned into a difference maker. What does that mean? Well, 22 points, 19 rebounds. He's just an efficient player. He's got a nice little face-up game. He can shoot that little face-up jumper. He doesn't do much offensively, right? He doesn't do a lot offensively. He's just kind of a one-dimensional offensive player in terms of his skill set, but he'll get the putbacks, he'll get the dunks, but he's got that little face-up jumper. So I thought the story last night obviously was Chris Paul. That's not anything crazy, but the fact of, and we were looking at it yesterday, The bigs, and we talked about this, are they going to keep dropping? The bigs just got absolutely smashed last night. Yeah, how many times did Brook Lopez get staring down Chris Paul? All night. And look, we saw this in game one, though, against the Hawks. So let's not go overboard. Where they had Drew Holiday in a similar situation. Brook Lopez was getting torched by Trae Young. And then after that, they kind of focused Holiday on Trae Young. The question is, though, you got to pick your poison. You could have Drew Holiday and pressure Chris Paul, or you can have Drew Holiday on Devin Booker. The Suns' dynamic duo at that guard spot, that's a tough draw for this team, man. They really are. Now, Holiday, for the most part, I didn't see him defending Paul, all that much last night. The Bucks were switching against Paul and Booker, for that matter. And then you're getting Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis constantly on the perimeter. That's just not a recipe for success. It wasn't a recipe for success in game one against the Hawks. It's not a recipe for success in game one against the Suns. But the point is, they lost game one against the Hawks in a similar fashion. I think if you're Milwaukee, you're thrilled that Giannis Antetokounmpo played last night, and he didn't seem to have – I just thought he looked tired at times. He's an Energizer bunny, and I thought at times he did look a little tired in the game last night. That's all. No knock on him. He hadn't played for a week. But I definitely think he looked like a guy who had not played for a week and just didn't have the same energy. But for the most part, look, he gave him something. He gave him 20 points last night and 17 rebounds. Middleton scored 29. So you got some decent score. Their defense let them down last night. That was the difference. And look, when I watched the Bucks in this series, in game one, look, it's one game. This isn't the whole series. This isn't it yet. But in one game, what I see is the Bucks are one guy short. They feel like a team that's just one guy short. And you remember they lost DiVincenzo, and you're wondering if Dante DiVincenzo in this series is the guy who's the difference maker defensively. Because they're missing a guy defensively. That's where they're lacking. Because they have Holiday. He could get one guy. He can't get them both. And then I thought Holiday was out of rhythm on offense. I thought Holiday looked much more comfortable in the offense without Antetokounmpo. Don't you? I mean, look what Drew Holiday did in the last couple games without Antetokounmpo against the Hawks. Much more aggressive, much more fluid. And then he has to kind of acquiesce to Giannis, and he just did not look the same. I'm trying to go back to, let me see, what did in that series, what did Holiday do the last couple games against the Hawks without Giannis in there? In the one game, he had 27 points and 9 assists in game 6, and that was without Giannis. And then in game 5, which they also won without Giannis, I think he had another monster game, if memory serves. That was the game that Lopez had the big game too. But Holiday, 25 points and 13 assists. So it's obvious that Holiday operates a lot cleaner without Giannis in the lineup. Now, what do you do in that situation? You can't value Drew Holiday more than the 2-time MVP. There was another area last night that I thought was a big difference in the game. And if you look at the end result, what happened? The Suns were pretty much in control for most of the game last night. I mean, second half, they were up double digits for most of the way. But look at the one number. Free throws. The Bucks shot 56% from the free throw line. To put some perspective on that, that is worse than Ben Simmons shoots during the regular season from the free throw line. They were 9 for 16. Okay? 9 for 16 from the free throw line last night. 56%. The Suns, on the other hand, 25 for 26, 96%. Booker, 10 for 10. Paul, 4 for 4. Even the big man, Ayton, goes 6 for 6. Bridges, 2 for 2. It's just a big difference in the game last night. They got 25 points from the line, and Milwaukee got 9. Milwaukee shot the 3 fine. They actually outshot Phoenix from 3. 44%, 16 of 36. Phoenix is just 11 of 34. The line was the difference in the game last night. There's where the game was won. In game 1, the game was won in 2 spots. The free throw line for Phoenix, and defensively. Milwaukee's defense it's not good enough. Now, it's almost a carbon copy feel, though. Right? It's almost a carbon copy feel of what happened to the Bucks in game 1. They just had no answer for Trae Young. And in game 1, it was like, what are you going to do? They can't figure out a way to stop them if you're going to run that same defense. Well, they shifted the defense. They went with Holiday. The problem here is, in that series, right, in the series against Atlanta, they could put Holiday on Young, kind of man-to-man, change up the drop defense, and they don't have a secondary player that Drew Holiday. Like, Drew Holiday is similar to what Ben Simmons was with the Sixers. Look, when you put Ben Simmons on Trae Young, he gave Trae Young some problems. And that changed that game a little bit. 609-403-0973. Just like when Holiday, he switched to Trae Young, that changed the game a little bit. Now keep in mind, again, the Bucks have now lost game 1, 3 straight series. They look bad against Atlanta. They look bad against Brooklyn. And they didn't look great last night either. And they have figured out a way to win all the first 2 series. 609-403-0973. A couple messages coming in over on the StreamYard. Kyle Dubray says Cameron Payne is a good player, not a great player. Right now, yeah, he's a good player, not a great player right now. He doesn't have the minutes to be a great player currently. When he has been given the chance to get more minutes, though, like when Paul was out for a couple of games, he was better than a good player. When you go back to, what was that, the first 2 games of the LA series, right? The first 2 games of the LA series, I think he started in place of Chris Paul because Chris Paul was out. And in that game, Cameron Payne, he was the guy who really dictated the pace and all that stuff. He had the 9 assists. He had the 11 points in game 1. And again, I'm not saying he's a great player. I'm saying he's a kind of player that someone is going to, and by the way, in game 2 of that series is when he had, he had 29 points in game 2 and 9 assists. He had 29 points in 37 minutes. So I think someone's going to identify him as a player that if he has more minutes, he's going to end up being a bigger player, a more productive player. I don't know, like in the first 2 series, they did not look good against Brooklyn. Well, who knew that Kyrie was going to get hurt? I mean, I think we understand that if Kyrie doesn't get hurt, the Bucks probably aren't here. The Atlanta series, man, you're kicking yourself if you're Philadelphia and you're like, look, are you kidding me? It is so frustrating to see how this all went down. But quite frankly, the Bucks have looked terrible in a lot of game 1s, and they have rebounded. And of course, we got to give a little shout out to Giannis and what he did last night. He certainly, now I said it yesterday when Jeff Nadeau was on that I thought he would play. And when he went from doubtful to questionable, there were some reports that I had heard anyway that he was going to play in game 7 had it got to game 7 against Atlanta, which told me that he was going to play last night. And not only did he play last night, he was, I don't want to say a difference maker, but he was definitely not limited last night. The only limitation I thought he had was in the cardio. I thought he looked a little tired. He still played 35 minutes, 20 points, 17 rebounds. They need to get better defensive play. That's where it comes down to for them. They need better defensive play. 609-403-0973. Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. The interesting story, too, in this is that you look at where both these teams kind of came from, right? Where these two teams kind of came from. These are two teams that essentially, the Milwaukee Bucks have been steadily one of the better teams in the league over the Giannis Antetokounmpo era, since you're going back to like 20. They drafted Giannis in 2013, right? I'm going back to, I guess Giannis took like 2 years to kind of burst onto the scene. So they've been a finals contender for like 3 seasons. No, Kyle, by the way, a couple games makes you a great player. No, I didn't say he was a great player. I said teams are going to look at him and say if he gets more playing time, they're going to identify him as somebody who can be a great player if he's given more time. When he's been given more time, he has produced. I didn't say he's a great player now. I'm saying he's an unrestricted free agent. Someone is going to look at him and say, that guy, if given more play, he's going to get paid as a great player. How's that? Not saying he's a great player. I don't understand what you guys listen to half the time. I'm not saying he's a great player. I said someone's going to identify him and pay him like he's a great player. He's going to get paid a boatload of money based on what he's done in these playoffs. He is not a great player currently, but if given the opportunity, a GM is going to pay him to say, we're going to give you more minutes. We're going to give you 30 minutes a game. In 3 playoff games, he played in over 29 minutes in all the games that Chris Paul was out. So anytime Chris Paul did not play, Cameron Payne stepped in and averaged 19.7 points, 8.3 assists, and a steal and a half per game. If those are his numbers, he would be classified as a great player. 19 points and 8 rebounds would make you classified as, that's a great player, 19 and 8. And right, his numbers and his playing time right now, he wouldn't be classified as a great player. He just doesn't get the minutes because Chris Paul's there. He comes in off the bench and does a good job. But somebody's going to identify him. They're going to say, we're paying that guy. We're going to pay that guy like a great player. He's going to get paid like a great player. Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, Jason Downing. I got a random question. Who was our punter? I like Johnson. Cam Johnson's no longer here. The punter is what is the punter's name? The punter, they do have a punter on the roster. His name is somewhat escaping me right now. Who is the punter on the Eagles? Man, I was just talking about this guy the other day, but Cam Johnson is no longer here. I'll find the name for you, though. But they do have actually a punter on the roster. I don't think that I think they only have one punter on the roster, too. I don't think it's like a competition. I think they have a guy. What's his name? Aaron Sippos. That's his name, yeah. Aaron Sippos is his name. He is a player from Auburn. He is the only punter that I believe is in right now. Mike, the big difference was at the line. Suns 25-26, Bucks 9-16. Bucks were better from 3. Yeah, that's what I said. Bucks were 44% from 3. The difference was the line. The two differences I mentioned, the Suns at the line and the Bucks defense was terrible. They were the two differences in the game yesterday, I thought anyway. All right, football at 4 with Moshe. Do you remember July 7th? We got that coming up. Todd Rank Report. We'll have another Rank rant at 5. And Jeff Kerr will talk some NFL later on in the show. Sports Bash Wednesday is brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage in South Jersey for your next local or long-distance move. Clark's Moving Storage is your first call. Dependable. They always show up. Online, clarksmoving.net. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. All right, 344. Hope you're enjoying your Wednesday. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. Don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Kyle chimes back in, says, since I don't know what I'm listening to, I think you said that's exactly the type of guy Morey would try to get to Philly. I didn't say he was going to pay him. I said figure out a way, meaning trade, because he's like a sign and trade type of situation. That doesn't mean that he's going to overpay him. He might pay him as a great player when he's just good. That's what you have to do sometimes. You identify a player that you think is better than what his current team values him at. That doesn't mean that he's great, good, or indifferent. If he says, like James Harden, for instance, all right? James Harden was a guy that was in Oklahoma City, and the role for him there was he was a bench player, right? He was the sixth man there. And Oklahoma City liked him as the sixth man. Daryl Morey viewed him as better than the sixth man. He viewed James Harden as a player who could be the number one player on a team. So he gave up a lot of assets to get a player that another team didn't view the same way that he did. At the time when he traded for James Harden, people were like, you're trading for the sixth man and making him a franchise player. James Harden was a good player in Oklahoma City. He wasn't a franchise player. So I'm not suggesting that Cameron Payne is James Harden. My point was that's the type of player that I can see Morey going after and identifying. What did somebody say on the show, I think a week ago? It was Paul Hudrick, is that Morey has identified players in his past that he would like to go after. That doesn't categorize them as good, great, bad, awesome, terrible. It just, he seems like the kind of player that Phoenix can't really play the minutes that he deserves, right? He's stuck behind Chris Paul and Devin Booker. When Chris Paul wasn't there, he scored 20 points a game. He gave out 9 assists per game. That's a pretty good player. So the point I'm making is I'm not classifying Payne as a good player, a great player, a lousy player. I said that's the type of player that what Paul Hudrick talked about last week, which was he would identify a player that another team can't use or value as much as this team would. That doesn't mean Phoenix thinks he stinks. They just don't have playing time for him. It doesn't mean he's James Harden. It just means if we had him on our team, we have a bigger role for him. And we've seen that if he's given a bigger role, that he can fulfill that role. That team doesn't have the role for him. Similar to what Oklahoma City had with a guy named James Harden. Doesn't mean I'm saying that Cameron Payne is James Harden by any stretch of the imagination. It's more about the role, right? It's about the role that he has. James Harden was the sixth man on that team. Daryl Morey said, I have a bigger role for you here. I don't know that Daryl Morey knew that James Harden was going to turn into the best scorer of the generation, but he identified a player that he could utilize more, right? You're suggesting that Morey's going to overpay him. I didn't say that at all. They can't pay him. They have no money in free agency. If they're going to get a player like that, they've got to do a sign and trade. They're going to have to make a deal to do something like that. They can't just sign him to a contract. They don't have money under the cap to bring in Cameron Payne. So they would have to do something creative, some sort of 3-team deal, sign and trade situation, something like that. So I don't think that they would just say, hey, we're going to trade you Ben Simmons for Cameron Payne. That's not what I'm suggesting. All I said was he is going to – you left the part about Nick Foles out because the part about Nick Foles doesn't mean – you're making no sense at all. Man, Kyle, you're a good listener. You're a good watcher, but you are way off base today. Did you hit something today? You got a little wacky tobacco or something, buddy? Will he pay him James Harden money? No, because he's not James Harden. No one's suggesting that he's James Harden. Not even close. I don't know where you're hearing that anybody's comparing him to James Harden. Kyle, lay off of it for just a minute. Just lay off of the wacky stuff for just a minute. No one's saying that Cameron Payne is on the same level as James Harden. What I said was he was in a spot, James Harden was, where he wasn't the starter. Daryl Morey said, you're not starting there. I'm identifying you as a player who I think can start, right? So I will trade for you because you're not starting on that team. On my team, you will start. And go look at the trade that they gave Oklahoma City. They didn't give up all that much to get James Harden, did they? You go tell me. Go back and look at that trade. Did they give up a lot for James Harden? Would they give up Kelvin Martin? They didn't give up a lot for James Harden at all. But what the point I'm making is Daryl Morey identified Harden as a player who was underutilized on the team that he was on. You rewind it all you want. Go back and play it for me, dude. You're going to be disappointed when you hear it. Sorry. At no point did we say that Cameron Payne and James Harden are anywhere comparable. Not even close as players. Not close, not the same, nowhere near. What we did say was that James Harden, by the way, got traded to Houston for Cole Aldrich, Daquan Cook. Oh, he got traded with those guys for Jeremy Lamb. Oh, Kevin Martin. Right, I was right. Kevin Martin and a first-round pick. So that's what they ended up giving up. It wasn't like they were like giving up multiple picks and top-level players. They gave up a couple journeymen, Jeremy Lamb and Kevin Martin, to get James Harden. Why? Because, as I said, Cameron Payne's not better, comparable, close to, even in the same ballpark. My point that I said was that James Harden was on a team where he wasn't a starter. Morey valued him as a starter. Oklahoma City could not start him. They did not start him. Payne is on a team where he's not going to start. He's just not going to start on that team because they have Chris Paul and Devin Booker. He's not the same player as Harden. They're not close. I never suggested they were close. What I said was he's a backup on that team. He's a backup on that team. So they're not going to pay. They cannot pay him to be on that team anymore. So he's going to go someplace else and get paid big money unless somebody makes a 3-team trade for him. It wouldn't be the Sixers who could pay him. They can't pay Cam Jordan. They can't pay Cameron Payne what he's going to get paid on the open market. He's going to get paid to be basically a superstar, not a superstar. He's going to get paid to be a star. He's going to get paid to be a starting player. And someone's going to pay him that. So he is going to get paid to be a starter. He's going to get paid to be a starting player 1,000%. He is going to get paid massive money based on these playoffs. And it's only 3. He played in 3 games as a starter. And based on those 3 games, he will get paid starting way too much money. Way too much money is what he's going to get paid. And Kyle, you will go back and listen to this and say, man, do I look like an idiot with all these comments? No, he is not going to get mid-level starter. He is going to get paid starting level money. He will get his socks knocked off in these playoffs because of these playoffs. There's multiple guys in these playoffs that are going to get overpaid. He will get, I don't even want to say he will get overplayed. I think he can play. If he's given the starting level minutes, he could play. There's nothing to say that if he's giving starter level, these guys right here, okay? Reggie Jackson is going to make a boatload of money. Is Reggie Jackson a great player? No. He's going to get paid like one. Cameron Payne is going to get paid like a starting top-level player. He is going to make a ridiculous amount of money. Those 2 players, based on these playoffs, are going to make huge, huge money. Period, point blank. Because somebody is going to value him more than, it's not that Phoenix doesn't value him, by the way, right? It's not that Phoenix doesn't value him. It's that they can't afford to pay him for the role, right? They can't afford to pay him for the role that he has now earned. Right. Timothy Mozgov got a 4-year, $64 million contract after what he did in the finals with the Cavs the other year. Yeah. Cameron Payne's getting paid, dude. he's going to get paid more than Timothy Mozgov did, which was 4 years, $64 million. Kyle, take another rip, brother, because at the end of the day, when you see his contract, I expect you to come back on here and say, holy mackerel, I can't believe the contract that Cameron Payne got based on 3 games. But he's going to get it. I guarantee that. Mosher, next. Football at 4. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., and it is brought to you this hour by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. I'm Mike Gill. Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here for another edition of Football at 4. We got some stuff to dive into today. And what's going on, Moshe?
How you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm doing all right, man. 2 weeks to go until training camp. I feel like we can almost taste it now. It's like right there. I feel like there's stuff happening. It's right there. It's kind of brewing, and I'm ready for this to go. Like, you got the home run derby Monday, the All-Star game. So you're really going to have that bleak period, and then boom, football is going to be here.
Hey, it says a lot about the Phillies when you're 2 weeks away from training camp and coming a team coming off 4 wins that you're raring to go.
Yes. Well, they get the 4-game sweep against the Cubs here. That maybe turns some things around. I'm not anticipating that, but let's get into a couple interesting things that have happened over the last 48 hours. I thought last night, everybody's going to be talking, Moshe. You're starting to see a little. Hey, Darius Slay sending out the feelers there for Steven Nelson, and Nelson seems like he wants to play along. He seems like he's interested. So, is there some sort of inside understanding or agreement that we should be aware of here?
I wouldn't say so. I'm sure that the Philadelphia Eagles and Darius Slay, of all people, has to be looking at the roster thinking, "Oh my Lord," at cornerback. Like, man, are we going to be in trouble? Although I would say Darius Slay's job is going to be a lot easier this year if the other corners stay as currently constituted, because they'll just be throwing at those guys all the time, and you won't even have to throw at Darius Slay. It might make him look better. But if they want to win anything and really stop anybody on defense, they clearly need a better option at corner, or one of these guys that we talk about all the time really needs to step up in a way that would be hard to see right now. I don't think anything's going to change from Howie Roseman's standpoint as far as what your valuation, not evaluation, but what your valuation of Steven Nelson is. If you see him as a $2 to $4 million a year corner, you're not at this point getting desperate and trying to pay him $5 to $6 million. You're paying him what you think he's worth. And if he takes it, okay. If he gets a better deal or less money to play for a more competitive team, okay, you have to live with those results.
Right now, signing a free agent of that magnitude, I mean, it's not huge money, but they probably can't even fit him under the cap, correct?
Well, I mean, they can fit anyone under the cap if they defer the money like they've done with everybody they've signed this year. You give a guy, $1 million, $1.5 million, and then of whatever the agreement is, you build some incentives in. A guy like that, I think you would probably have more incentives to make sure that if he's going to be around or if he's going to make his money, you want him motivated and playing well. It's a 1-year deal anyway, so you would probably build some in. But you can obviously, the dummy years. They've been doing that for in-house restructures and for free agents that they've signed.
Obviously, yeah. Darius Slay says to Steven Nelson, "Hey, you would look good in green. Like, green would look good on you, man." And Nelson, responds like, "Hey, if it were only if it could all be that simple, my man." So in other words, like, just tell your guy to make the call, and we can get this thing done. Obviously, Slay, as you mentioned, is looking across from him and saying, "We need somebody over there." So he throws out the bait. The question that I have for you, Moshe, is, I know that it's been looked at what they have currently not good enough, but is bringing Steven Nelson in here, does that make this defense more competitive in terms of it changes the level of who they are now? And you bring him in here, whoa, all of a sudden you're here.
Yeah, it makes them more competitive, certainly. Does it fix them and turn them into a top 10 defense? Probably not. But if you look at certain matchups, and Quentin Michael and Jason Avant talked about this on the Q&A show that dropped this morning. Say the Giants. You play a team like the Giants that brought in Kenny Golladay this offseason. Kenny Golladay, when healthy, is a good wide receiver. Not a great one, but a good one who's been a good touchdown target, right? He's a guy that is not exceptionally fluid. I mean, he's a kind of a deep threat guy, contested catch kind of guy. That's the type of guy that I think Darius Slay can be all right with. He can hold down Kenny Golladay. He's supposed to. That's supposed to be a guy that Darius Slay should be able to hold down, former teammate, right? However, if that's the case, if you're locking Darius Slay up on Kenny Golladay, then who's covering Darius Slayton? Darius Slayton is now the kind of number 2 wide receiver. He's already given the Eagles fits as a number 1 Giants wide receiver. Now you're looking at a guy like Darius Slay matched up against Zach McPherson or Craig James or Michael Jacquet, right? And that's a game changer for the opponent right there. That's at least 10 to 12 targets to Darius Slayton and against whoever's lining up that you like the offensive advantage there. You put Steven Nelson there, a little bit more experienced, a little more savvy, has played the position well. Didn't have a great year last year, but still better than what you are getting from the other options there. Then you feel a little bit better about matching up with Darius Slayton in that regard. Now, I just brought up the Giants. How about the Cowboys, who have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup? And you're going to face a lot of teams this year, when it's Kansas City, when it's Tampa Bay, who have really good number 2 receivers and number 3 guys who can move to the outside if need be. And that's going to be a spot. You talk about the game within the game, right, Mike? And all the good quarterbacks who prior to the snap know where the openings are going to be. Well, that's an area that, no matter how good the pass rush is, the quarterback's going to know he's going there and have an opportunity to make a play.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I have seen, look at the Pro Football Focus rankings or this executive's rankings or yada, yada, yada. Nelson ranked higher than Slay. We're just assuming that Slay's the better player. Is that the case?
I respect PFF. I do question some of how they come up with some of their rankings. I can only tell you that, I have some pretty good sources in Kansas City and in Pittsburgh, the 2 teams that he's played for. And the message I have is that he's a good player who tends to think he's a little bit better than he is, has been the beneficiary of playing with good fronts. Obviously, the Steelers get a lot of pressure with the way they run their defense, Kansas City as well.
He would theoretically have a good front here.
Yeah, he would theoretically have a good front, right? I mean, good front 4, not necessarily as good of a front 7 as maybe those other teams. But, yeah, and we have to see whether Jonathan Gannon's pass rush schemes are going to work or not. But, yeah, but the bottom line is the message is he's a 2 corner, maybe a 3, number 3 corner who can be a number 2 corner, but nothing more than that.
Obviously, either way, better than what they have currently.
Of course.
Currently better. Let me get your take then, where we are with Zach Ertz, because there's now starting to feel like he's going to show up to camp.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last week where there was that report where the Bills were close, and that was not what I was hearing. And so obviously he's still here.
Well, actually, it's funny because Merrill basically had to go out and walk that back because I guess apparently he had recorded the interview a couple of weeks ago. The interview aired at a later date, and he said, "Look, that was recorded when I was here." So he did kind of come out and defend himself on that.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I mean, look, Zach Ertz faces that situation where if you don't report to camp, you get fined pretty heavily now. It used to be you could hold out all you want, and now you get pretty steep, pretty heavy fines for not showing up. Now, the question is, if he shows up, what do the Eagles do with him? Does he practice first team? Are they 12 personnel from the start? Do they act like he's just a player on the team and they're going to proceed forward like they did with Alshon Jeffrey last year? Or are they going to basically say, all right, you're here. We'll kind of treat you like the over 30 veterans, and we won't, you won't do too much. It'll be interesting to see exactly because the last thing they can afford is for him to get hurt, right, in training camp, because the whole purpose of holding on to him at this point, I would think, is to try to trade him to a team that is now desperate because they suffered an injury at tight end. So what happens if you're running Ertz out there with the first team and he breaks his leg? Then you literally have the Alshon Jeffrey thing all over again, where you can't get rid of that guy nor that salary. So yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens when he shows up. Yeah, well, I guess it's one of those things where, and you take like stuff that Spadaro says, I guess, with a grain of salt, but he said that my sense is Zach Ertz will be one of those players reporting. After that, we'll see how it plays out. So in other words, hey, if he's still on the roster when training camp comes, he will be here. If it gets to that point and he's at camp, that will be interesting to see if the Eagles then feel compelled to move him once he already shows up. That will be next. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think training camp eve, which is going to be what, July 27th, is it, or 26th?
26th. He says, this is what Spadaro said. I think he was on Sirius, I guess this morning or maybe yesterday. He said, when players report to training camp on July 27th, my sense is Zach Ertz will be one of those players reporting. After that, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, training camp eve, July 26th will be an interesting day. I mean, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just saying, like, obviously that then if you do not want Zach Ertz even on the roster, potential of getting hurt, that's your deadline day, to make something happen.
Yeah, because you're suggesting, not reporting, suggesting if he gets to camp, if he shows up, then the Eagles feel like, okay, he's here, let's just roll with him.
Well, I'm saying that if he shows up and he's there, then they have a difficult decision to make of how much they want to get him on the field and risk an injury.
Well, that's another point, I guess, right? Because then he's on a 1-year deal. You can't trade him if he's hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it defeats the whole purpose if your point is to still get rid of him. So
you think if he shows up to camp, then you got to play him with kid gloves?
This is why if I were running the show, which I'm not, nor am I qualified to, but I mean, I probably would have done something differently by now.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's so many layers there. Something differently by now. All right. Well, they're not getting what they want, right? That's obvious.
Correct.
It ties back to the Steven Nelson thing. Hey, you would look good in green. Well, if it was only that easy, let us just move this guy, then we can go get you. You know what I mean? Like, don't sign with anybody else. There's a spot for you here. We just got to figure out how to open that spot.
Yeah. Yeah, Howie Roseman, he makes mistakes, but he's also smarter than me, and I have a feeling he's got a plan in his head, and we'll see if it works out. And if not, which we've questioned some of the moves before and saying, did you actually have a plan with this? Then we'll criticize it then.
What's more likely, Moshe? Ertz is here week 1 or Steven Nelson?
Week 1 of the regular season?
Yeah.
Steven Nelson. Not saying that that's very likely. I'm just saying I think that that's more likely than Zach Ertz.
That's a pretty bold statement.
I don't think it is, really.
Like Steven Nelson.
Now, if you had thrown in, so you put me in a spot, if you had thrown in, neither are here, I probably would have picked that one over that. But, that's not fair.
I don't want to play that game. That's no fun.
I know.
Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Doug Peterson was on Sirius XM NFL Radio today, and this is interesting because he mentioned like the whole Jalen Hurts thing about why they drafted him. Now, he's not here anymore. Are you buying what he's selling? That, hey, this is what we do. And he mentioned, like, this is what we do. And he said, we're always going to do that. In other words, we value the backup quarterback.
So repeat that, the first part. Who said this?
Doug Peterson today.
Mm-hmm.
He basically was saying that, look, we did not draft Jalen Hurts to undermine Carson Wentz. We drafted him because we value the backup quarterback. We won a Super Bowl with the backup quarterback, and we will continue to look for quarterbacks.
Is he still speaking on behalf of the Eagles? I'm shocked by that. What does he mean by we?
Right, he says, and we continue to look for quarterbacks, and that's always something that will never change. We won a Super Bowl with our backup quarterback, and we've had to play with our backups a couple times in Philadelphia. So we did that a year ago and brought in Jalen Hurts, not to undermine Carson Wentz, not to do anything to take his job or anything, because Carson was our starter. He was the franchise. But we wanted someone that could come in and could be the backup and learn how to play the NFL game.
Well, I can only speak to the first part. Well, I can speak to both. But from a reporting standpoint, the first part of that is true. I mean, that's something that Adam and I have consistently said. There have been multiple conspiracy theories. There have been things that people have said just to pump up Jalen Hurts a little extra more about how this was all the plan from the start that are just not true. They drafted him to be a backup quarterback at a cheaper rate than the going rate they were paying for backup quarterbacks, which had become $20 million, I think, or whatever, $12 million, I forget, to whatever Nick Foles made there in that last year. But it had gotten to an absurd amount. Now, when Doug says we will continue, I believe that because wherever he is, and he's part of that Andy Reid chain, who's part of that Mike Holmgren chain, part of the Ron Wolf chain, which is we draft quarterbacks pretty frequently in the later, in the later stages of the draft, to try to get our future backups so that we don't have to pay for them. But I will continue to maintain that doing that in the second round is not good business, and none of those past Packers guys ever did that. And I don't know why the Eagles thought that this was like, that they were reinventing the wheel here. Because as you saw the result, it did not work out well for them.
Right. Well, in hindsight 2020, if they don't draft Hurts in the second round, is Wentz still the guy here?
It's a great question. I think there's a better chance that he is than he isn't. I mean, obviously the offensive line injuries still have to be accounted for, and the pounding that he took and other things. But, obviously Carson was not happy about being benched for Jalen Hurts. And would they have benched him for, say, Clayton Thorson if Thorson had made the team and was in his second year at the time, or Nate Sudfeld? I don't know about that.
Right. Now,
so it caused an issue.
And again, in hindsight, are you better off with the value and return you got for Wentz because you took Hurts, you were able to do that, or just keeping Wentz?
Great question. I don't know. That's like you're asking me, would it have been better? Would the Eagles have been better if they had Jeremy Chin at safety last year instead of Jalen Hurts? Would that have helped save the defense? Maybe.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I said, look, were they a safety away from not being a 4-win team? But now they took a quarterback that allowed them to make a decision on the other quarterback.
Yeah, but then they went and had to make moves to get 3 first-round picks in case that guy is not their quarterback. So for every action, there's a reaction, which just basically goes to show you that the Eagles aren't sure. They don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that as they're absent-minded. I mean, they're just like us. They have a lot of they didn't expect this happening. That I can very much tell you. No conspiracies here. When they drafted Jalen Hurts, they did not look a year ahead and say Carson Wentz is going to hate us, want to leave. We're going to have to trade him. We're going to have to maneuver. Yada yada. They did not see that coming, right. And so they're
totally agree with that.
Right. They're trying to fly by the seat of their pants a little bit, but still be a good team and still try to do what they can. And for that, they've done a decent job of at least collecting a lot of draft capital to help themselves, but they're entering kind of an uncharted, unknown territory.
Right, because that's what I'm saying. Like, they draft this guy in the second round. They are able to now find out that the guy wasn't the guy they thought he was. So you got all this draft capital, which is probably better in the end, hindsight, than having Jeremy Chin.
Maybe. Jeremy Chin had a pretty good year now last year, so we'll have to see.
He did. Absolutely. You're right. And
I mean, this is almost like getting into, all right, well, if we didn't miss on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, we wouldn't have discovered Travis Fulgham has some really good ability. And if Travis Fulgham becomes really good, we could say that it's good we missed on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, because now, I mean, you get into a point where it gets a little silly here. You just want your team to be
I agree.
Make good decisions, But
the funny part is when before you came on, when I was talking about this, scenario, I mentioned you could have had Jeremy Chin. Does he make you are you feeling so much more confident now if Jeremy Chin's playing safety instead of Anthony Harris? I don't know.
Probably. I mean, he had a good year. I mean, maybe he'll stink this year. Maybe he'll become a Pro Bowler this year.
Or if you get the Anthony Harris that you got in Minnesota 2 years ago.
Perhaps.
Real quick, I do want to get your opinion on this. They're doing the series over at ESPN where they're asking the executives about to rank their players. Fletcher Cox ranked number 5 as an interior lineman. And basically, I'm wondering if the team still looks at him like it was like, hey, do we have to game plan? Like when we play the Eagles, executives are still saying, hey, we need to know where Fletcher Cox. Did you see that from him last year?
Well, I mean, I thought you saw an inconsistent player last year for what he has been. I mean, I do still think he is one of the better defensive tackles in the league. And I do believe that when you see how offenses align to stop him, you do see double teams on Fletcher Cox. So he's still the guy that you draw the circle around when you're game planning for the Eagles until he just doesn't become a good player. But he's still a good player. He's still a guy who can displace offensive linemen, from right to left or left to right in a way that not a lot of guys can. He can drive guys back. He can rush the passer. Is he as explosive as he is sideline to sideline as he was 3, 4, 5 years ago? Maybe not. Probably not. He's played a lot of snaps the last few years, but that's not uncommon at the position that he plays. And I still think he's one of the better defensive tackles in the league. And if he's healthy and fresh and the D-line around him is playing well, then you got a chance to get yourself still a pretty good player out there.
Yeah, I'm interested. Like, at what point, can you no longer count on Fletcher Cox being Fletcher Cox? And does that decline your defense? Same thing with Brandon Graham. I was admittedly not a fan of the contract they gave him. He has outperformed what I thought he would do.
Mhm.
But you're wondering, at what point does Brandon Graham just turn into just an average guy? And Fletcher Cox, same thing,
Yeah, no, I think it's a very fair question. I have no idea if Fletcher Cox is about to become Derek Landry overnight. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I feel like he's always been kind of a different kind of cat. Like he's not the most. He's like when you talk about a physical specimen, usually you're talking about a guy built like an Adonis. He's not built like an Adonis, but he has some freakish strength, Mike, that like I said, the ability to kind of pick up a guard and move him left or right with his two hands. He's always had that, whether he's playing really well or not. So some of that stuff just doesn't go. That's what your hallmark is. When it goes, you might really become just an average player. I don't know that I see that happening, but there's a lot of things that I don't see happening that wind up happening in the NFL.
Man, this was a good one. On board today. We got it 2 weeks from now, July 27th. That will be 2 Tuesdays from now, actually. 3 Tuesdays from now is when they will open up. So just under 3 weeks to go until Eagles training camp opens and all the storylines will start. The guys over at the Inside the Birds podcast, it drops tomorrow morning. The Giants pod is the most recent one that is up now with Greg Cosell, so you can check that out. Tomorrow, Adam Kaplan is here. Andrew will continue our divisional looks on Friday, and we're looking forward to that. All right, man. We will catch up with you on Monday.
All right. Have a great weekend, Mike.
Check out the Inside the Birds podcast, Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. It is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast is Football at 4. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. You know all those prop swappers that they took our advice. Luke Pergandy kept telling you, go out there and get a Suns ticket all season long. Hey, the Suns. Well, people are selling Suns tickets like crazy on PropSwap. You can go buy one of those right now, right? You can go to PropSwap right now and find a Suns ticket. A $74, 33-1 Suns ticket to win the NBA Finals just sold on PropSwap for $1,600. That's the way you make money with PropSwap. You bought that ticket for $74 and you sold it. You swapped it out to somebody. Hey, you take my ticket. He had the Suns at plus 3,300. That person, if they win the NBA Finals, that person is collecting $2,500. That's how you prop swap. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Do you remember? These are events that happened on this day, July the 7th. Now, it's kind of a slow time of the year, so you got like a lot of Wimbledon we've been talking about a lot this week. Which, by the way, Federer win today?
He got knocked out.
Oh!
He got knocked out by the guy who was making fun of his name yesterday.
I think Federer is going to be a part of Do You Remember tomorrow, by the way.
I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, these are events that happened on this day, July the 7th. Let's take a look back in time. How about this one? I never knew this story. 1914, Orioles owner Jack Dunn offers future baseball legend Babe Ruth to the Phillies, the Philadelphia A's at the time, for $10,000 to Connie Mack, who refuses, pleading lack of finances. How about that? The Philadelphia A's could have had Babe Ruth, according to lore.
Lack of finances is a great line.
That happened a lot back then, though.
Oh, yeah. People don't realize that sports 100 years ago was nothing like it is today. Like people act like these guys have always been making money, and no, back then there were teams that were barely making enough money to pay the bills.
Yeah, but like there were so many times where, realistically, Boston has to trade Babe Ruth because they can't pay. They don't have the money.
They trade him for money.
Right. They have to give him to the Yankees for nothing. We talk about all the time, like Babe Ruth, the name, how perfect that is to have that name. But Babe Ruth playing for the Red Sox would have been such a different lore, don't we think? Like if he was Babe Ruth with all the home runs and all the accomplishments, but he did it for the Red Sox, not the Yankees.
Well, here's the problem with that thought, and that is, see, before Babe Ruth got to the Yankees weren't the Yankees. The Red Sox had won more and been to more World Series before the Yankees ever got Babe Ruth.
Right.
So if Babe Ruth stayed in Boston, does Boston become what the Yankees became?
That's a good point. 1937, fifth MLB All-Star Game, Griffin Stadium. Lou Gehrig drives in for the homer and double. I bring this one up because Lou Gehrig, Yankees.
But it wasn't for Wally Pipp taking that day off because he had a headache, remember?
Yeah.
There's a lot of what ifs that go into
Well, there's so many Yankee players, though, that made the Yankees. But Babe Ruth, I guess, going there launched it.
He started it. He started it, and then there was Lou Gehrig, and then the rest is history.
A lot of All-Star games on this day, by the way.
Next week, All-Star game. You going to watch?
Yeah, maybe. Probably not.
I was so non-committal.
I haven't watched the All-Star game in a while.
There's no NBA Finals that night, so.
No, there's not. It's the only thing on that night. Which is interesting because normally the nights after the All-Star game, you still get nothing. You got the NBA Finals in there. I like this schedule the NBA's giving you, but I'm imagining it's not conducive to ratings. Middle of the summer nights are not great ratings nights.
The numbers so far that have come out have not been bad, but they haven't been amazing.
No, but keep in mind, this is a little late in the year to be playing the NBA Finals.
Oh, it's definitely late, and also don't forget about the fact that there's a lot of people who they're so antsy to get out of the house right now because of everything that's happened over the last 16 months. There's people who, I was out this weekend, and people were asking me, they were like, wait, what night is the game on? I'm losing track of what night the games are on because I've been out all the time.
Conference finals, you were getting them every other night.
Right. And now that the conference finals were done, people were confused. Was the NBA finals starting?
Right, but you're getting the Home Run Derby Monday. Then Tuesday, you're getting the All-Star Game. Wednesday is typically that day that never has a day. That has nothing on. Right. And this year, you're getting the NBA Finals Game 4. That's awesome.
I'm down for it.
They got to do this more often. They got to figure out how to do it. Although Adam Silver kind of was questioned about the whole, shortened schedule and all that stuff. They're going to try to go back to the old way next year.
Yeah, they're pretty much poo-pooing it. Everyone's going to use this collective bargaining agreement thing. A shame. Really is.
Yeah. All right, 1980, Larry Holmes, 7th round knockout, TKO of Scott LeDukes in Bloomington, Minnesota. It's defending his WBC. Now, we talked about Holmes a couple of times. Probably one of the more underrated heavyweight champions. Now, what's the story with, speaking of the heavyweight champion, what's the story of Tyson Fury?
Okay, so there's a report that came out this week that Tyson Fury is telling people that he wants to fight Deontay Wilder at 300. Like, he wants to come in at 300 pounds because he wants to outweigh Wilder so much that Wilder can't take his punches. That's the report that came out this week. Now, remember, Tyson Fury usually cuts down to about like 280 roughly because, typically there's no legit heavyweight limit. But the theory is that if you're conditioned, you're going to lose some weight, right? Just naturally at some point. You box every day, hours a day, you're going to lose some weight.
Yeah.
Well, Fury's trying to put on weight
Right.
while he's trying to get in conditioning because he claims that he's going to hurt Wilder.
So who are you taking, Larry Holmes or Tyson Fury?
Holmes. Because I think Holmes would outbox Fury. I think Fury is as talented as he is. I love his story personally. I have to be objective and say that I think Holmes was the better technician as a boxer.
Yeah, Holmes just didn't have a rival.
Holmes was unlucky because he rose at the end of the Ali era and before the Mike Tyson era.
Yeah,
So,
he was in
he was in no man's land.
right. No rival, no adversary, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's like Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis and him are very similar. They both were phenomenally talented boxers who had great hands, but they both had no real rivals, and they both fell in these dead zones of heavyweight boxing history.
I like these tennis names that we've been seeing. And we talked often this week about how the women were the bigger stars. 1990, Martina Navratilova wins her record 9th Wimbledon singles. She beat American Zina Garrison. Now, Zina Garrison's a name we haven't brought up. But when we were growing up, 1990, Martina Navratilova was like Federer. She seemingly won every single tournament.
And you had no idea when she was going to slow down. She was a machine.
She absolutely just felt like she was the unbeatable tennis player of that generation growing up.
It was the fait accompli. Martina Navratilova is going to win the tournament.
Always. Here's one for the Philly fans out there. You ready for this?
Sure.
1993, Lenny Dykstra hits a bases-loaded 2-run double. Phillies 7, Dodgers 6, 20 innings. Remember that game?
That game was 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
No, that was the Padre game.
Oh, okay. I'm mixing up games then.
Yeah, this is just a game against the Dodgers. But that was the doubleheader game when Mitch Williams had the...
Right. Yeah, I remember the 4 a.m. game because I stayed up and I got in trouble for it.
Yeah. 1998, it's the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, Coors Field. It's the highest-scoring All-Star game ever. American League 13-8.
They're back in Coors Field this year. Did they break the record?
That was summer of 98. Baseball was just loving it. Home runs everywhere.
Home runs galore.
What else we got here? See, a lot of these, we've been mentioning, a lot of these tennis Wimbledon ones, man. These are great names. 2002, Leighton Hewitt. Remember him?
Oh, my goodness. The Australian.
Yep, wins his only Wimbledon. He beat David Nandelbaum of Argentina.
See, now there's a reason why that guy never won anything. Because his name
You don't
is
see that often, though.
That guy never won anything. That's why.
Yeah. Here's two names you'll like.
That guy should have played
2006,
soccer.
Cleveland first baseman Travis Hafner is the first player in Major League Baseball history to hit 5 grand slams before the All-Star break. He homers off of Baltimore's Chris Benson.
Wow, that's a name.
Yeah, remember Benson? He pitched for the Phillies. His wife was more famous than he was.
Way more famous. And in fact, if that would have been a different era like today's era, that would have been a whole nother conversation.
Anna Benson. Are they still married?
No. That's been over and done with for a while.
Didn't go well, huh?
Nah. But it would have ended sooner if there was Instagram back then.
2013, Andy Murray. This is the one that we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
Andy Murray beats Novak Djokovic 6-4, 7-5, 6-4. He becomes the first British man. That was he won gold that year and Wimbledon.
Yeah, and he said it was the greatest year of his life. He said after he won both of those.
Yeah.
Good for him. Nice guy, I've heard.
Andy Murray. What else?
This is the moment I should tell you my Joker story.
Oh, yeah. That's right. The other day we were talking about Joker, and you told me a story off the air. I said, that's a story you got to put on the air.
So you most of the audience may not remember, but I know you do. The establishment Game On at the Pier Shops at Cedars in Atlantic City.
Yeah, one day they just showed up to work and it was closed.
Yes. Well, I was a frequent customer over there, in part because of my previous radio gig, and also because I just ended up getting to know the people that I like the place. So I'm there one night, and I turn around and I see Novak Djokovic stumbling in there. I mean, he was having a good night in Atlantic City. And but he was a nice guy. Like, he wasn't like a mean guy or anything. Just a nice guy. Very, very talkative. But that was back when you could tell, like, I don't know if it was because, he was a little tipsy or because his English wasn't great. But every once in a while he'd talk and he'd like miss an English word. So like he'd be having a conversation. It's like he'd like skip like an adjective or like a verb or something.
So he was total.
Oh, he was total. But it's super
Was
nice.
he by himself?
Yeah. He was there. Remember back when they used to have the Venus Williams things where she would bring in all these tennis players in to play these tennis matches with World Team Tennis?
By the way,
City.
the Phillies just signed Cam Bedrosian, son of Steve Bedrosian.
I mean, is that a Philadelphia thing or what? I can imagine Billy Schwein loving that move.
Yeah, well, I know that Frank Close suggested that in the mailbag yesterday.
Yeah, well, Frank suggested because Frank's being objective.
Well, one of the reasons was he just got DFA'd, I think, by the A's. So he's a veteran reliever who has had some success in Oakland. Let me. This just came down just a couple of minutes ago. He was in 15 games this year. He had a 5.52 ERA and a 1.98 WHIP. So he has not been very good this year. But that said, he has been decent in the recent past, I guess you could say. He pitched in Cincinnati this year for 6 games, was horrible, was decent in Oakland. His ERA was 2 in Oakland. In Cincinnati in 6 games, he had 11.52 ERA. His career ERA, though, is 3.79. He had a good season last year with the Angels. He had a 2.45 ERA. The year before that, 3.23 in LA. He spent a lot of time with the Angels.
Yeah, he did. But Philly fans, they love their connections.
On this day, do you remember the Phillies signed Cam Bedrosian? Probably to be their closer, believe it or not.
If Cam Bedrosian becomes the closer and he has any level of success, he will be a superstar in this town.
Yeah.
Because they're all the dudes, 35 and up, and they'd be like, "That's Bedrock's son, yeah." It's true.
Most people don't even remember Bedrock, probably. Although he did win a Cy Young in 87 here. One of the most unlikely Cy Young awards ever. By the way, 2019, the United States women beat the Netherlands 2-0 in the FIFA World Cup final.
I feel like they win every final. American women's soccer is like one of the few things that America could point to and be like, yeah, they win all the time.
And basketball.
Hey, man, Sue Bird and all of them are trying to win another gold this year.
Although
the Agumake sisters are trying to get on another, I think it's the Nigerian team, and if they pass the process, they actually might play in the Olympics. So
gotcha.
Because there's a big controversy about.
I didn't realize that. Speaking of like playing, I didn't realize that Matisse Thybulle's playing on the Australian team.
Yeah, Matisse is and Ben isn't. What does that say?
I didn't realize he had the kid. I mean, I know you have to have like some. You don't have to live or beef, and it has some sort of connection. But
you have to have a family connection. Yeah.
All right, Sports Bash Live. That's what happened on this day. Roger Federer, by the way, on this day, just a little while ago, lost, so he is out. 39 years old. I don't know how much longer he's going to keep going.
I don't know either, but when you do get to watch him, it's fun to watch.
Pretty cool. All right, we'll do the rank report coming up. Todd Rank, I know he's been watching that all day, the Federer stuff. He's been texting me nonstop on that. 5:25, Jeff Kerr on the NFL. So earlier this week, our Phillies insider Frank Close suggested that the Phils should sign Cam Bedrosian. Well, they listened to him. And he just signed with the Phils. So Cam Bedrosian, all right, so real quick, 29-year-old, designated for assignment earlier this week by the A's. He split this year with Cincinnati and Oakland, 5.52 ERA, a whip around 1.98. He had pitched better with the A's. He has not. He did not pitch well for Cincinnati this year, I can tell you that. In 5 innings, he gave up 10 hits, 7 runs, walked 6. The walks have been the problem. He has 10 walks this year in 14 innings, and the whip's 198. Not good. He had a good year last year in the shortened season. It's hard to really tell. He pitched in 11 games last year, had a 2.45 ERA. In 19, he pitched 59 games, 3.23 ERA. Not a closer, so don't think he's going to come in here and help that position. He does have 9 career saves. He had 6 saves back in 2017. Primarily, he has pitched in the Angels organization. Obviously, his father was Steve Bedrosian, who won the Cy Young Award back in 1987 for the Phillies. And he's a guy that, look, I don't think this helps them out all that much, to be honest with you. I don't think he's going to come in here and all of a sudden, look, he's 29 years old, so maybe he has a little bit left, but this is the desperate times that the Phillies are under, where they have to go out and get a guy who had an 11.12 ERA, 11.12 ERA, and a 2.82 whip over 5 2/3 innings earlier this year. The Reds just said, all right, we're getting out of this game. He goes to Oakland. Now, in Oakland, he was much better, but that's where the Phillies are. The Phillies need to get a pitcher of this ilk, because they have nothing in their system. Their bullpen's terrible. Now, the question will be, they signed Bedrosian. What do they do to get him in their bullpen? Is he going to come right up? Are they going to send him to AAA? Mike Gill, by the way, was the one who tweeted this out. He signed a minor league deal. So I imagine that he will not join the team and help this team out immediately. I don't know that he'll help the team out at all. Over 8 years, he has a 3.79 ERA. But he did tweet this out that it's a minor league deal. So Bedrosian, minor league deal. Phillies adding to their bullpen. I would imagine you'll see him up here at some point soon because they need bullpen help that bad. That's why. They need help that bad in their bullpen that they have to go out and make a move like this. So the A's designated Bedrosian for assignment earlier in the week. Today, the Phillies are taking a swing, hoping he can help their bullpen. Struggled this year, 5.52 ERA, 198 whip, 14 2/3 between Oakland and Cincinnati. But that's, the breaks right now. That's what you have to do when you have the bullpen that they have here, is that you have to keep trying to draw straws and find a guy. And this we were talking about the other day. It's like throwing money at your kids when you have a problem. When they're, hey, we have a problem with our kids. What can I give you? What can I pay you? And that's what happens, is you keep throwing money at the problem. You don't fix the problem. You just keep pushing the problem, kicking the can down the road. Where one of these, they're hopeful, I'm trying to think of a time where the Phillies, go back to the guest from the locker room on Sunday, Scott Air. He was a guy that the Cubs designated for assignment. The Phillies picked him up, and they were able to get something from Scott Air in 2008. J.C. Romero was another guy that was designated for assignment, and the Phillies picked him up, and he worked out for them. That doesn't typically happen. You just keep throwing money at a veteran player who teams just keep giving a shot, and they say, this guy doesn't have it anymore. But that's what teams do when you're desperate. You just got to keep throwing money at these guys and say, all right, hopefully Cam Bedrosian comes in here and can help us out. He has joined Lehigh Valley, according to Matt Breen. So he will, I would imagine, be there. And I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't have the 40-man in front of me. I guess to get him up here, they're going to have to make a 40-man move. And then, they finally got rid of David Hale. I would imagine the next guy on the list of players that would be gone. Who's the next bullpen arm that you're just like, all right, you're the next guy that we can get rid of? Man, let me think off the top. I don't have the roster up. Let me bring the roster up here in front of me so that I can give somebody their just due. Brandon Kinsler, De Los Santos, I guess you can send back down. They're going to get, Chase Anderson's another guy who's on the injured list, so you got to wait to see what happens with that. I would imagine that Kinsler would be maybe in some trouble in this situation. Coonrod's on the injured list. The guy who's really hurt them not being able to pitch is Sir Anthony Dominguez. He's the one young arm that they had in their own organization, and he hasn't been able to pitch in 3 years now. It's really crippled their bullpen because he probably would have been their back end of the bullpen guy. It's amazing. And by the way, just to throw this out here, Zach Wheeler pitches tonight. It'll be his last start of the first half of the season. The Cubs have lost 11 straight games. They need to win this game with Zach Wheeler on the mound. If they lose this game tonight, it's a complete disappointment to win those first two games and then the possibility of splitting the series instead of winning the series tonight. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. I'm Mike Gill. Coming up, Todd Rank. It's another Ranks Rank report on the other side. We'll talk about last night's NBA Finals game. Chris Paul dominates the game. We'll get that. What else is he watching? Well, I know he's watching a lot of Wimbledon, a lot of soccer. Hey, tomorrow on the show, Jason Fitz, who was scheduled to be here today, he is filling in on the network. So he will be on tomorrow's show. And we'll talk about his experience as the sideline reporter for the Nathan's Hot Dog competition on the 4th of July. Plus Adam Kaplan tomorrow for football at 4. Keith Smith on the NBA Finals will preview Game 2. But coming up next, it's Todd Rank, my former co-host. We do another Rank report here on the Sports Bash. All right, final hour of the show. What's going on, everybody? It's the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. I'm Mike Gill. This is a Wednesday edition. Todd Rank is back for another Rank Report. Now, there's so much happening in the sports world, much of us are not interested in, but you, Todd Rank, are watching all of it, man. I don't know how you have the time in your day to be paying attention to Wimbledon and the Euro 2020, but, man, it seems that you're enjoying what's happening.
And when do I fit a job in, Mike?
Right?
When do you work with all this going on? We got the NBA Finals.
Do you work? I mean, all day today, this tennis is consuming you.
I mean, if you can see behind me, I've got extra time, England and Denmark on behind me.
I mean, when all of a sudden did you get into this soccer?
I will say this. This is something, though, that I've always been about, is these sports that I don't watch every day, but when it comes to the big boy tournaments, I lock in. Whether it be, for example, Wimbledon. You know what I mean? When you get the 4 big Grand Slams, when you get the Euro Championship. Because I don't know enough about soccer, Mike. Do you understand by now all of the different leagues? They play year-round. I have no clue.
That's the problem. Like, you know, the soccer element of it is if you don't follow, like, all the rules in the leagues and this and that, you got guys that are on multiple teams, and it's very confusing to the novice soccer fan.
Agreed. They've got their little community team that they play for. Then they've got the country they play for. Then they got their national team they play. There's too many. I mean, I'm watching like Ronaldo. He's on 4 different teams. I don't know which team he's on and who I'm supposed to be rooting for. So for this one, I like the Euro Championships because let's be honest, Mike, and I hate to say it, I live in this country. This is the best soccer. I mean, this Euro Championship.
Well, everybody knows that.
I mean, it's clearly different than
right. I mean, you watch these games. I mean, look, there's a reason why the NBC Sports go out of their way to go get the Premier League and all that stuff to put on. You know, they know that people are yearning for a better brand than what we're given here.
And this goes back to my question. And I watched it the other day. I forget who it was. Maybe Ukraine. I think Ukraine has 8 million people in their country. We got 300 million, Mike. I get it. I get it. We got football. We got basketball. What have we done wrong in marketing this sport in our country that we can't get out of 300 million people 12 to 20 of the best in the world soccer players? What are we missing?
I think there's a lot there. It's a fair question. There's a lot kind of like we've kind of like over the World Cup years that I've done, like we've kind of examined, like we always hear, oh, it's the fastest growing sport. Everybody plays it. The problem is it's still like I'll drive by the soccer field on whatever. It's just like basically like you're dropping your kid off for like an hour of babysitting. You know, like there's not like teaching and fundamentals and like the coaches still, I don't think like in these other countries, it is like it's a year-round experience that you're getting like the top level. Here you're just like, hey, I'm going to drop my kid off. I'll be back in an hour. They play some random game 7-on-7 on a short field and like no one's really learning anything. It's just like, hey, you're out running around and you're like, that's still, I think, at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they're still getting like very novice teaching.
Well, and I wonder, do we have
the point where you make that decision? Do you want to stick with that? You know, because there's not money to be made in that sport really still here. And I mean, it's funny because I was on a rep team. I was a pretty good soccer player up until about 9 years old. Soccer.
I was legit on the travel team. But at the age of 10, for whatever reason, I burned out and I said, I want to go play baseball. I hadn't played baseball yet. So I just wonder the evolution when we're kids. I mean, Mike, it's the cheapest sport you can play. You get a ball. Just get a ball and go on grass, go on a field, go on dirt, and you can still play soccer. You know, golf is so expensive. Football, the equipment. Hockey, the equipment. Everything is really expensive. This is the cheapest sport you can play other than get a basketball or get a soccer ball. And for whatever reason, Mike, we just don't promote it. There's something we don't do in this country. because it should be the easiest sport to get kids into.
Oh, even still, even with like, hey, the best athletes are playing football that time, because you're playing football and soccer in the same time of the year, right? So you have to make that decision. Do you want to play football or do you want to play soccer? I mean, so the best athletes a lot of times are going to play. Like if you said every wide receiver in football started early and played soccer and that's what they concentrated on, you'd probably find 11 guys who are pretty darn good. The problem is, you're not getting the best of the best athlete. In the other countries, you're getting their best, and you're getting their best. It's like somebody who wrestles, okay? If you don't start wrestling at such an early age, you are so behind because the technical aspect of that sport. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If you're not technically advanced enough, you could be as strong as you want. The guy who has more technical ability a lot of times is going to win that because he has the training in the background. That's like soccer. It's a very technical sport.
And this is what I do appreciate. When I watch these Euro Championships, it gets me at least to watch the game, to understand at your best, what do you do? And the possession of the ball, to your point, the technical terms of how they get and control the soccer ball, it's such a gap when you watch MLS soccer and just the possession of the ball and how they're not able to control the ball down the field. It's amazing how these guys work the ball in and out of different defenses. And so I really do marvel in that sense. I also think that the United States, we love points. We love scoring. And soccer just doesn't have enough of it. You've got a true soccer fan has to appreciate the game for what it is. Possession, passes, all these little intricacies that have nothing to do with scoring the ball. And I think we have an instant gratification in this country that we want points, right? How do we get more home runs in baseball? How do we get more points in basketball? How do we get more touchdowns in football? We want points.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's all offense.
Well, it's funny. It's the whole Ben Simmons conversation. The fact that he doesn't score, he stinks. He's a good defensive player. He's a good passer. He does this good. I don't care. He doesn't score. Therefore, he stinks.
Right. He needs to go play soccer because he could be a star. He could play in that midfield and you never have to score a goal and they think he's the greatest thing ever. Oh, man. But it is a fun time. It is a fun time.
It's funny because that's going on and then the Wimbledon's going on. I know you're watching that. You got the now I was talking about this the other day is that, my guys, like tennis is a young man's sport. Like 16-year-olds win there. And here you got Federer who lost today, but the man's 39. He should be still active.
The man who beat him today, Mike, was 15 years his younger. And we were talking about this on our text thread this morning with our buddy Pete. I'm looking at Federer and we want him to continue to, like if you root for him, you want him to win titles. He's always won. He was dominant for years, decades. And the funny thing is he's still number 6 in the world at 39 years old. But now for him to win 6 straight matches at a Wimbledon, it's tough to do, right? On the clay, on the hard courts.
What do you think is more like? We were talking about this the other day. Like tennis to me is one of the more underappreciated, difficult things to do.
Well, and Mike, the way they play today, like John McEnroe admits, he couldn't play. He wouldn't even be a star. He wouldn't even be a star in today's game. The way that the speed of the game, the power of the game. You talk about physically having to be in fit. Everybody always talks, and we know the argument is, what is a sport, right? Is golf a sport, right? Because they physically, what are they doing? Well, then Tiger came along, he gets himself in shape. But you got John Daly smoking a stogie while he's playing golf. You're not going to be able to smoke a stogie and play tennis. So I want to say, if you're talking about, I think soccer probably is the number one physically demanding sport. I think tennis is a really close second. I really do. In the cardio, these guys are playing 5-set matches, Mike, that can go over 4 to 5 hours long. I mean, you and me, we'd be on the floor gassed after 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, yeah, like now, sure. But like, I think that the aspect of playing tennis is so undervalued at how difficult, like you're standing there and a guy's smashing a serve at you at 115 miles an hour. And the fact that he gets that perfectly placed, like you're not going to go out there and just start racking serves up like that. People act like, you go out there and try to hit a serve and just try to hit a volley back and get it to where it's perfectly boom. You don't just go out there and do that.
No, and it reminds me of where we are in baseball, where you've got pitchers throwing 100 miles an hour, and the reaction time as a batter that you have is almost nothing, right? I mean, that's where the talk came in. Do we push the mound back another 6 inches or whatnot? Because
I got a better idea. They figured it out. How about not letting the pitchers put spider tack all over their fingers?
Well, they've locked that down.
Right? That seemed to work.
I mean, are the numbers going up? Have we seen yet?
Yeah, the numbers going up. It's not even close. All of a sudden, Garrett Cole's not worth $375 million anymore.
Well, and let me tell you, was it the score last night I saw? Was it the Phillies who beat the Cubs 15-10?
Yeah, well, it was 15-4 in like the 7th inning. You know what happens then?
Well, then you got trash coming in to throw. But regardless, that's 25 runs being scored, Mike. We weren't seeing those games. How many no-hitters this year? How many no-hitters?
There's a lot. I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I want to go over to the NBA Finals because you said something last night that I actually agree with for once.
Wow. Well, you didn't tell me then, so I'd like to hear now.
Well, that's because I get the text in the morning when I wake up.
Well, what did I tell you last night?
Well, you were talking about, and I agree, and this is one of the things when you watch Ben Simmons when he's playing really well, okay? Not what he played in the Hawks series. He was dreadful. But when he's playing at his best, he's not scoring, but he's controlling the flow and the pace of the game. He kind of controls at the pace that the Sixers play. He didn't do that in the playoffs, and they lost. Chris Paul last night controlled the whole damn game. He was like moving chess pieces. You're going to come here? Boop, I'll do this. You're going to drop back on me here? Boop, I'll do that. You want to come out on me? Boop, I'll do. I mean, he absolutely is controlling the game. Now, it's pretty crazy because he's 36 years old, and this is a guy who hasn't been able to get it done. So I question all of these finals now, seeing that Chris Paul is the best player at 36 when he hasn't been able to do it in the past.
Well, and my argument to that, Mike, would be this.
Give me something.
You got to have the right setup around you. And you got to have a lot of things go right. And this year feels like, and even this year, things didn't go right for Chris Paul. I mean, he gets the COVID after he already got vaccinated, right? He gets these injuries, these little tweaks. Last night, Brook Lopez came under his leg. I thought, oh, don't tell me. And it took his ankle out. You've got to have so many things go right. He's had this talent, Mike.
Oh, I'm not.
For years, right? We know that. Yeah, we know that.
Chris Paul fan. I've said, though, I don't know that Chris Paul is the best player on the team that wins the championship.
Well, he will be this year if they win it. But the point is this, Mike. He's different. When we say he's the best player on the team, we're not looking at him as KD. We're not looking at him as LeBron. We don't look at him as Steph Curry.
Right.
What he did last night, he's been doing his whole career, but everybody's able to see it on a big stage now. He controls the game in such a way. It's remarkable to watch.
That I agree with.
Yeah, no, and that's the key. The key is he gets the other players involved. Now, he does have a star in Devin Booker, and we can't go without saying that. But what he's done to DeAndre Ayton and his game, I marvel at. It is so fun to watch. That Ayton kid, I remember coming out of college, Mike, and I don't know what you thought of him, but I didn't think he was a top 5 pick.
Well, I tell you, the problem was when he was coming out, the league starts to change, and you're like, well, he's not going to go out and shoot threes. Like, that's what, he looked like a guy who was going to be a very defensive-minded rim protector, almost like a better version of Nerlens Noel.
Exactly. And what he's turned into is, by the way, like an 85% free throw shooter. You trust he's going to make every free throw. And he has been taught this year, Mike, by the best, being Chris Paul. And again, I will give credit to Monty Williams, but Chris Paul really coming in there was a culture changer where he said, Ayton, you're going to get better. I know you can play better. I'm going to teach you everything and what to do on every play. This kid doesn't make almost, I watch every time up and down that floor, Mike. He almost never makes a mistake on what to do on the pick and roll, how to roll to the basket, when to pick up, when to go back. he is always around, Mike. And he isn't an imposing figure. Yes, he's a big guy, but you're not scared of him, I don't think, if you're playing on that game. But he always seems to be there. And the fact that his numbers last night, Mike, were numbers with Wilt Chamberlain, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Come on.
Right. He scored 22. I think it had 19 rebounds last night.
And I saw Chris Paul got that last rebound, and he was like, oh, he knew it. As soon as he got that rebound, the clock expired, and he went, oh, yeah, that was for your 20th. You would have had that 2020.
Well, I mean, you also, like, this is a weird matchup. Like,
it is weird.
Because they got Drew Holiday. He can't defend both Booker and Paul. And the way they defended him last night, they tried to do the same thing now. They did this in game 1 against the Hawks and got blitzed, when they tried to use Lopez in that and he was dropping off. And Trae Young just destroyed him. Now, the second game, they moved Holiday to Young. The problem here is Holiday can only defend Booker or Paul. He can't go both.
Well, pick your poison, but who would you put him on? Because I know I'd put him on Paul. I mean, that's the head of the snake, Mike. I know Devin Booker can go off for 40. Kid's unbelievable. But Chris Paul's getting everybody involved. And I know Devin can do that to a point, but we know there's a clear separation there. Chris Paul, when he got going last night, Mike, he didn't have any points in the first quarter. He scores 31 for the game.
The weird part is, like, we don't think of Chris Paul as, like, this elite scorer, right?
I know.
Like this,
I know.
He's the steady point guard. Like, I joked the other day, like, he's the last guy coming up the court, putting his fingers up and, like, calling plays out still, like that type of point guard. But, I'm happy for him. I like Chris Paul. It just feels like it was one of those things where it's like, I feel kind of like Chris Paul and the Suns are going to win the title. Like, this is kind of
Well, but there's that one aspect. I get what you're saying. Like, these
feel like it's kind of like.
Well, you know why? Because there's no Steph Curry, there's no KD, and there's no LeBron. How many years has it been since none of them have been in the finals? We're not used to it. I like it because, to me, it's a breath of fresh air. I also like that there's other guys who have the opportunity to win it. I do think the Suns have a really good story, and I think Giannis can write a story if he somehow figures a way to win this title with this Bucks team, because it starts to put him in that level with the other guys, right? He wants to get there. You know what he feels like to me, Mike? He feels like Andy Murray in tennis.
Another Andy Murray reference today.
Did you have another Andy Murray earlier?
Well, it was on this day in 2013 that he won Wimbledon.
So, and this is what I'm not sure where Giannis is going to go. Look, I think he's an unbelievable talent.
Well, I will say this. If this Suns team sticks in this mix for a couple of years, we'll look back at this as, okay,
yes.
But if they go back to like the 5 or 6 seed next year and then just like it was a 1-year wonder, it will be more disappointing.
Good point. No, we're going to have to look. The future is going to tell the story, but for Giannis, this is how I feel like he is right now. There's Djokovic, there's Federer, there's Nadal, right? There's KD, there's Curry, and there's LeBron. I mean, Kawhi. Don't get me wrong, but my point is, Giannis feels like that Andy Murray. He's better than everybody else, but he's not quite in the same room with those 3 guys yet. And if he can get that title this year, Mike, it felt like for that moment when Andy Murray won that Wimbledon, he got in the room with those other guys. Now, that door shut real quick. Yeah, no, that's
long.
That door shut real quick. But I do think the mentality of Giannis is different. I think he's got that. Look, I don't want to put a Jordan word with anybody, but he has a mentality, Giannis, whatever it takes to win. You can feel that, right? And I think that's where it's going to carry him in the future. The question is, who's he going to be surrounded by on his team? And I'm still not a buyer of that head coach for Milwaukee. I know he's got him in the finals. I got to give him that credit.
That whole situation, dude's going to be so weird. Like, if they win the title and you're thinking, like, we want to fire the coach even though we won the title.
Right?
It goes back to what I always tell you.
The player plays.
You don't want to agree with me on this, but.
I mean, the player plays. That's the truth. And they've got.
It's like 80-20. That's my blame game. My blame game is 80 players, 20 coach. Because so many times the team that wins, the coach, people don't want to give the coach credit. When the team wins, it's, he has LeBron. Of course he's going to win. So then how important is the coach?
Well, and I'll give you that percentage for 80% of the coaches in this league, right? Like, I think for 80% of the teams, you're right. It's 80% player, 20% coach. But I do think that there's a small percentage where the coach definitely matters and needs to be there. Like I think Thibodeau did an unbelievable job with that young team. I don't think that team gets what they – and again, I'm not saying you have to win a title as a coach.
Well, part of it is, with the Knicks, Thibodeau is coaching a team. They didn't rest their players. They basically played their guys every night, like they went for it. Like some teams are resting their guys, all that nonsense.
And they were a younger team, right? So you got younger, fresher legs. I mean, you're going to rest Kawhi. You're going to rest LeBron. So, I mean, but can I say this to you, Mike? Were you not surprised? I made reference last night. I don't know if you were on the text thread or if you were asleep at that point. That Giannis.
You get me at 12:45 in the morning, I'm probably asleep.
Giannis, I swear, has a bionic knee because how did this guy even play? I got to give him credit, Mike. How did he play? I mean, I look at that replay.
Well, I said yesterday, there was a report that said he was going to play Game 7 if it got to Game 7.
For last series.
Right. That if they would have gone to Game 7, there was a report that he was going to play. So it told me yesterday when he went from doubtful to questionable that he was going to go.
But that's still remarkable, Mike.
It is. Look, these guys are in tremendous shape, by the way.
Wow. Just
right?
wow.
They're in tremendous shape. And keep this in mind. Like, Giannis is – I thought last night he did look tired at times.
Which makes sense. I mean,
right.
Even Trae Young when he got injured and came back.
But,
yeah.
I'm going off last night. They have lost the first 2 games of each of the last 2 series. They lost to the Hawks. They lost to Brooklyn. And in both the games, they look terrible. Like, you're like, dude, what is up here? And we keep ripping Budenholzer like they didn't make the adjustments. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And they came back to win both those series. So,
well, here's the only thing I'll say, Mike.
Yep.
You just said who those teams were. They're not the Phoenix Suns. Now, I really think Milwaukee has to win Game 2 because you're not telling me that Milwaukee's going to win 4 of the next 5 against this Phoenix Suns. I just can't see it, Mike. So I just think they've really got to win Game 2. They got to put all their eggs into that basket because, again, Phoenix has the home court. They got a healthy team pretty much right now. It's going to take a catastrophic injury or something to this Phoenix team if they take the first 2 games. You can't go to that well too many times. Look, the Clippers tried to go to that well again, and it bit them. I mean, you just can't go down 2-0 every series and expect to win.
All right, I want to leave with this. Yesterday on the Ringer podcast, Chris Mannix, who covers the NBA, says, quote, I hear from executives all the time they are loving this Ben Simmons trade value has cratered conversation because they hope that Philadelphia actually believes that. Because I think his trade value is actually higher than what is being publicly portrayed. But you're going to continue to hear a lot of negativity around Ben Simmons. In other words, I think people value him pretty high across the league.
So they're going to voice – so it's the game, right? They're going to voice that they don't –
I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Who's playing the game here?
Well,
because you believe he has no value.
Well, I don't want to say no value.
Very little.
To the bad teams, I think he has a lot of value. To the good teams, not as much.
Well, the teams that they've been mentioned is Golden State. They're mentioned in Portland. They're mentioned in, almost, they said, I was reading something the other day that they're getting calls. Indiana made an offer, Malcolm Brogdon, and a first-round pick. The Sixers already turned that down. Like, they're getting offers already.
Well, we had talked the other day, Mike. What would it take? And the good teams can't necessarily give the Sixers as much as the bad teams will be willing to give. So even if the talk on the surface is, hey, this kid's not much value, we're going to let his stock drop and then try to steal him, I still don't think a Golden State, who honestly, when we look at it, Mike, I think it doesn't hurt the Golden State Warriors. I think it does help them, but I don't think it helps his game evolve. And I also think Golden State as much. Well, I know, but I'm just thinking of the kid. I mean, I am thinking of Simmons in a sense.
That's nice of you.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, work on the game, evolve if you're going to move on. Don't just go to another team have the same issues.
Well, I mean, look, maybe that team is saying we understand. Like, I think the Sixers did this a little bit. Like they said, we understand your limitations. We're not going to ask you to score, but we need you to do this, this, and this. Okay, great. That's what a team's going to say. Golden State, okay. We bring you in. Steph Curry doesn't have to handle the ball as much. He can catch and shoot. He can go off the dribble. Klay Thompson can just catch and shoot. He doesn't have to, they don't have to be primary ball handlers all game long. Maybe it extends their career. And we've seen Ben, when he's got shooters around him, he drives and kicks and guys make threes. I mean, he's leading the league in assisted three-point shots 2 years in a row now. And by the way, the team he had before couldn't shoot threes to save their lives.
Well, before this year, right? Before you brought in some guys.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, and I would say this. If he goes there, that's a solid foundation of a franchise, right? If he went to Golden State, they're pretty smart guys. They've got a good thing in place. They're going to probably help him get better. They're going to teach him. But when we get down to the logistics of it, Mike, okay, they're going to give the Sixers Andrew Wiggins and the number 7 pick. Is that good enough? No, Sixers they want more. I don't think.
No,
I don't think
that was part of the report. Was that
they
are not taking anything less than another all-star level player.
Exactly. Who is that guy? You got to go search him out. That is an all-star, but has a little deficiency, right? Because he can't be a true all-the-way great player because that's not equal. It's just not equal.
By the way, on that point, I was talking earlier. This Cameron Payne's going to get paid.
He is going to get paid.
Yeah.
What a nice player he is, huh?
Ooh. I mean, he's going to get a boatload of cash. Someone's going to pay him a boatload.
Would it be the Sixers?
They don't have any cap space. So that's why I say no. But he's the guy, like, I was comparing it to, not the player, but the situation. When Morey was in Houston, he said, look, you can't pay him. You're playing him as the 6th man, right? I'll take that guy, and we'll make him our star. Like that, some team's going to try to do that with this kid, where they're going to maybe overvalue him, but I think they're going to look at the same situation. You can't pay him. We'll go after him, and we'll make him our player because that kid can play.
Well, and it's hard because the evolution of your career, he's going to want the money, and he's going to want to be a starter. The problem is most likely he's going to get that money from a bad team. And right now he's in a real good situation where he comes in.
He can't get playing time there. He's going to play 15 minutes a game.
You're going to win a couple titles. I mean, you're going to.
If he gets one this year, he can go make his money and say, I already won my ring.
I know that's usually what the course of the action is. I know.
All right. That's all for today.
Who you got game 2?
Right. I go Phoenix.
I go Phoenix as well.
I get Milwaukee, though, when they go back home. I go 2-2 when it gets back to Phoenix.
You think that Milwaukee can still win this series down 2-0?
I do. Yeah. I mean, they're going to win it 2 games at home. They'll win both games at home. It'll be 2-2. Bang.
Best of 3.
Yep.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
See you. There's the Rank Report. Todd Rank. We never got to the Ohtani conversation. Man, I forgot to ask him about that. We got that coming up next time. I got stuff I got to do. You can see him on the video going, I want to talk about Ohtani. Next week. All right, Sports Bash Live on the other side. More NFL. Jeff Kerr's in the house. I want to ask Jeff about Jalen Hurts, and I want to ask him about Steven Nelson, and we got some more to dive into. 14 days before the NFL opens up. 20 days until Eagles camp. We got you coming up next. Hi, my buddy Jeff Kerr's here from CBS Sports. We're going to get more into the NFL, some interesting tidbits today. Jeff got a great piece also for you guys to go rank over at CBS Sports. He's looking at the teams that have never won a Super Bowl and ranking them by the best chance to do it this season. See who's on the top of that list. Plus, I want to get his thoughts on some of the Eagles news that kind of filtered around today. Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, 97.3 ESPN.com. He'll be covering the Eagles this season. And, Jeff, we're 20 days away from training camp, so I guess we got to start with Darius Slay is trying his darndest to get Steven Nelson on the opposite side of him. Do we think Nelson might be in Eagles green sooner than later?
Nelson seems to think it's easier said than done at this point. He seems to want to play in Philadelphia. I guess it's more of a contract thing right now. Numbers aren't matching up, or maybe he wants a little more, and maybe he's trying to see how much the Eagles will go, and they'll meet a happy medium there. But Mike, does it really matter if he signs, on July 7th or July 14th or July 27th? No, it doesn't. But it does look like that there is mutual interest between the Eagles and Steven Nelson at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if he signs when. It's just the question of, are they the reason I find this intriguing, okay? Let's connect some dots here, right? Slay says you look good in green. He says, yeah, easy, this can get done. They don't have the money in the cap space to sign him unless they do some sort of wonky type of deal. You have the whole Ertz situation kind of looming. You wonder, have they been in contact with him? Have they said, hey, just let us figure this Ertz situation out and then we'll bring you in? Why is he not signed yet? I guess is the bigger question. Is he just waiting for this situation?
I think that's what it is. The guy has pretty much had 12 to 15 teams interested in his services. And if he's already talking about going to the Eagles with Darius Slay, that means he's narrowed a lot of these choices down. And look, if you're Steven Nelson, it's hard pressed to give up, say, a team that gives you $8-9 million guaranteed because you're the top cornerback left on the free agent market. You don't have to give up anything for him. But look, we got to find out what's going to happen with Stephon Gilmore. Is he going to lead the Patriots? There are other cornerbacks that are probably available, but Steven Nelson is there for the taking. And I think right now the Eagles are probably giving him an incentive-laden deal. Okay, here's maybe a $2-3 million base salary, and we'll up it as we go. But you're right, Mike. They got to figure out what the heck is going to go on with Zach Ertz. And maybe they're trying to figure out if there's a way they can keep Zach Ertz and sign Steven Nelson. But it'd be a lot easier to sign Steven Nelson if Zach Ertz is cap number.
Now, let's go to Zach Ertz because Dave Spadaro said on a radio appearance that, hey, he envisions that Ertz would be there. Now, what happens once he gets here, out of his control. But in other words, he's not going to hold out. He's not going to take the fines. And my question for you, Jeff, is if it gets to the point that he makes it to training camp and he reports, do the Eagles just say, let's roll with it?
I would do that, honestly. And Zach Ertz is going to show up. He's one of those guys. I just don't see him holding out. And the future of his NFL career is at stake right now. He did not have a good year last year. He needs to be in training camp, and he needs to learn this offense. And I think a guy like Nick Sirianni, a motivated guy like him, and Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, will say to him, hey, look, we need you. We need you bad. We need you to be part of this offense. We need you to help this quarterback out. We need you to help Devonta Smith out. Be a veteran leader. Be a mentor to these guys. There's going to be competition for your job, obviously, with Dallas Goedert. And look, Zach Ertz knows this is his last year in Philadelphia anyway. Why don't you just make the best of it and try to have a really good year and then leave on good terms in free agency? This can all be rectified really quick.
That'll be interesting. Let's go over to your piece over at CBS Sports. 12 teams have never hoisted the Vince Lombardi trophy. You ranked them in order from worst to best odds in your mind of winning this. Couple teams at the top are pretty interesting. On this list, I would say that there are 3 legitimate Super Bowl contenders on this list.
I could definitely see 3.
3's what I got.
Okay, so the 2 are obvious. Bills and Browns. They were my top 2. And Bills were the clear-cut number 1. This wasn't a disrespect to Browns fans at all, but I need to see more out of the Browns. And the Browns are a really good football team, but the AFC is loaded, and they play a loaded division with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. They're never out of it. They never had a losing record under Mike Tomlin. So take that what you will. They're better than the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we got to be realistic here. The Buffalo Bills, the AFC East is theirs right now. And I know Miami is a good team, but Buffalo has their number. The Jets are rebuilding, and I'm not really sure what the Patriots are going to be. And honestly, Mike, I don't think there's a better team in the AFC in Buffalo than the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I mean, that's just how I feel about this Bills team. I think they're really good. I don't think Josh Allen's going to regress. I actually think he's going to get better. I think they got better across the board. I'm worried about their run defense, but I think the Buffalo Bills are – I would not be shocked if they reach the AFC Championship game again.
I like the Buffalo pick, and in Cleveland too. I'm last year I was not a believer so much in Cleveland. It's like, show me. They finally did that last year. Now you got me on board. Now I can say, okay, Cleveland, I will buy into you. The other team for me though is Tennessee. I like Tennessee right up there with those guys.
Oh, I think Tennessee getting Julio Jones was a huge move for them. I'm telling you, Mike, I think Julio Jones is going to have a monster year for that team. I know they're going to miss Arthur Smith, but he was due to get a head coaching job at some point. But Ryan Tannehill, if you look at the numbers over the last 2 years, he's a top 5 quarterback. I don't care what anybody says. If you look at the numbers, he's a top 5 quarterback since he became the star of the Tennessee Titans. You have the best running back in football in Derrick Henry. You have a great offensive line that knows how to protect the quarterback and protect the running back. You have Josh Reynolds now in that fold. You have A.J. Brown. He's one of the best deep ball receivers. You have Austin Ferser, who they think is really going to be good. You got Julio Jones. Their defense scares me a little bit. That's why I had them a little lower than Cleveland and Buffalo, but Tennessee is no joke. I think they're the favorites to win the AFC South. I think they're the favorite. I think they can win at least a playoff game, and it's honestly kind of shocking, Mike. They do not have a Super Bowl. All the years they had Earl Campbell, and I know Dan Pastorini was not a good quarterback, but still, they had good teams for a lot of years, and it's kind of shocking they've only been to one Super Bowl.
Now they fell a couple of yards short with Kevin Dyson and that crew.
1 yard short.
McNair, right? 1 yard short. But they did add, like, you mentioned their defense. They were disappointing defensively, but Dupree, and we'll see what Caleb Farley adds to them. I like those 3 teams. Now, the 4th team on your list is Arizona. I don't look at them as a Super Bowl contender. I don't even know that they make the playoffs because of the division they're in.
I went by ceiling and for this one. And
that's fair.
This is how I look at it. Kyler Murray was really, really good last year until he got that shoulder injury. And we were talking about week 9, week 10. The Cardinals may be a threat in the NFC. They were definitely a threat to win that division. They were better than Seattle. They were better than the Rams. And the 49ers were injured. I thought the Cardinals were – and look, I was high on the Cardinals going into that year. And then Kyler Murray got hurt. And everything just seemed to fall apart after that. If Cliff Kingsbury can limit Kyler Murray a bit, not throw this guy 45 times a game while running him 15 times, basically making him 95% of the offense, I think the Cardinals are going to be fine. And I think their defense is a lot better. Chandler Jones is back. Isaiah Simmons is going to take a big leap. I love the Zaven Collins pick. I'm a little worried about their secondary, but I'll tell you what, Mike, they have as good of a chance to win the NFC West as anybody else in that division.
You have Minnesota on this list at number 5. These are the teams that have never won a Super Bowl. Jeff is ranking them who has the best chance to win it this year. Now, Minnesota, I think, can make the playoffs. I don't know that they win a Super Bowl, though. But their offenses, they do have weapons on offense that make them it could be a Super Bowl type of offense. Their line needs help.
I think the Vikings are a good team, but I think their ceiling is NFC divisional round. It's kind of sad, honestly, because I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but he just seems limited, or he can't win the big game, or whatever the demons are. I don't know if it's because he's had different offensive coordinators all these years and he's finally kind of got some stability there, but Kirk Cousins was not the problem with the Vikings last year. Near was Dalvin Cook, near was Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Irv Smith's going to be a stud, by the way. It was in the trenches. It was the offensive line. It was the defensive line. They missed Danielle Hunter. And Eric Wilson's an Eagle now. And I know he kind of had –
So was Anthony Harris.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they kind of had decent years with the Vikings last year, but overall their defense was not good. And I think because they missed a guy like Jonathan Gannon who developed those guys, and they added Patrick Peterson in there. They tried to fix up the secondary a little bit. I think the Vikings defense – look, they were a top 10 defense pretty much the last 5-6 years under Mike Zimmer before last year. Last year was an anomaly. I think the Vikings are going to be back because we all know how good the Bears are going to be when they're going to play Justin Fields. We know the Lions aren't going to be good, and we really don't know the Aaron Rodgers situation. This team could win the NFC North, but I think that's their ceiling.
All right, a couple more. Number 6. Now, I like this team, the Chargers. I mean, I think the Chargers could be a team that makes the playoffs. Last year, obviously, they had all these close games, and then Justin Herbert really had a breakout. Didn't have a lot of help, but I think this year, if they're healthy, they've never been healthy. They're never healthy, this team. But if they can stay healthy, I think the Chargers are a scary team.
It's amazing what happens, or with a franchise when you get that franchise quarterback. And the Chargers have one, Justin Herbert. So they're going to be in this conversation for a lot of years. As long as I'm doing these rankings at CBS Sports, they're probably going to be in the top half because they have Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen's a stud. Mike Williams is a really good deep ball receiver. I think you're going to miss Hunter Henry a bit, but I wouldn't have paid him what he got paid. Jared Cook's going to be fine. Austin Eckler's a really good running back. They seem to run the ball. They're pretty efficient. I think they're going to miss Shane Steichen a bit. To me, that was kind of I don't understand why they moved on from him. But again, new head coach, he wants to bring his own guy, I get. But the defense is really going to make strides under Brandon Staley. It would not surprise me to see Chargers make playoffs this year.
All right, now this group of teams, Jacksonville.
It drops after the Chargers.
Cincinnati, Atlanta, Carolina, Detroit, and Houston. Of that bunch, who has the best shot of making the playoffs? I got my pick.
It's funny because I like Atlanta, I like Carolina, but I don't like the division they're in. So they're out. Detroit stinks. Houston stinks. I got to go Jacksonville. They're in the AFC South. I mean, it's Tennessee, Indianapolis.
No way.
I got to go with it. I really do.
Man.
Oh, who you going with?
Tennessee and Indianapolis in that division.
You get to get 3 teams in there now. We got 4 teams.
I guess.
I don't think Jacksonville's actually going to make it, Mike. I will say that I don't think they're actually going to make it, but I think they have a shot because they have the uber quarterback in Trevor Lawrence.
I like Carolina. I thought last year, like Matt Rule, I thought they fought, and then they just didn't have enough talent last year. And remember, McCaffrey didn't play for them essentially the entire season.
And I was leaning toward Carolina. I just don't trust Sam Darnold. I really don't. I think
I'm saying of that group, I think boom or bust. Darnold might be like, hey, boom, he's got McCaffrey. I think their defense is solid. I mean, I like Rule as a coach, too. I think
I do, too. I think Matt Rule is an incredibly underrated coach. I think that team's going to be better. I just don't think they solved the problem. I think they should have gotten the franchise quarterback.
Of that group, I don't think any of them make the playoffs. But if I had to pick one, it would be Carolina of that group.
Yeah, if you had to put the betting odds on it, I think Carolina would probably have the best betting odds there. Yep. And again, when I ranked Carolina, I think I ranked them 10th. They ended up. It was because of Darnold. I just don't trust him. I think he's got a lot of talent. But again, and this may be a little homerism here because I did go to Penn State, but I was at the Rose Bowl, and I'm like, okay, Sam Darnold is ultra talented. There's no doubt about it. But it's easy to complete passes when guys are playing 10, 15 yards off wide receivers. And he had the Deontay Burnett. He had Juju Smith-Schuster. He had a bunch of talent there at wide receiver. He's a really good quarterback, but he hasn't shown in the NFL. He has to show me something first.
It's a fun article. Check out the full article over at CBS Sports at Jeff Kerr, CBS. And, of course, the NFL just 20 days away until Eagles camp opens. And, of course, we'll be all over that. And, of course, Jeff will be with us all season long covering the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com. And he will be at training camp and Eagles game days. It'll be a good season of Eagles coverage from Jeff. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, Mike. By the way, I got my most controversial article of the year coming out next week. It is the top 10 quarterback head coach duos. And I will say this, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni will not be on the list because they are ineligible.
Ineligible. All right. Well, that's fair. At least it wasn't because they.
Yeah. First year, like I kept Brady Arians off the list last year for a good reason. Everybody's like, oh, I'm like, they never played a game yet. And I said, now they're easily top 5.
We'll certainly dive into that article when it's published from Jeff Kerr. All right, bud. Take care.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Mike.
Jeff Kerr here on the Sports Bash. There you go. He's got that article coming out. We'll have that to kind of dive into. And, of course, he'll be back on Friday's show. But when we come back, we'll wrap up today's show. What a fast show today has been. What's today, Wednesday? It's a Weinberg Wednesday. Dave Weinberg joins Josh tonight on Game Night at 6:20 here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 5:52, getting ready to run off the finish off today's show, I should say. Josh Henning's my producer. Real quick, Josh, got the lineup for the Phils tonight, by the way.
Okay.
Segura's leading off again. Real Muto, Harper, McCutchen, Hoskins, Gregorius, Bohm, Jankowski. Hey, 15 runs. If it works, might as well stick with it. Wheeler getting the ball tonight for the Phils.
I like that. I like that. Like the fact that they're saying, hey, we found something that works. We're going to stick with it. We're not going to get too crazy. We're not going to get fancy. Just if it works, play them.
Right. Well, Herrera's the one guy who's not in the lineup tonight. They're sticking with Jankowski in center field. They had mentioned they're going to kind of do that there. So that's your lineup tonight. Very disappointed if they lose. I'm going to be ticked off tomorrow in here if they lose tonight.
Well, if they lose tonight, I don't think it's going to be because Jankowski's in the lineup.
No, I didn't say that. I say with Wheeler pitching, if they lose, I'm going to be ticked off. It has nothing to do with Jankowski. He's actually been pretty good. Got to give him, other than the night he got caught by the catcher.
Right.
I can't complain. Put it this way, him hitting the 8 hole is fine. Don't he's hitting 346. Let's hit him in like the 2 spot.
No. I think they finally have a lineup that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think you'll see Herrera probably slide back, and I think they'll keep him in the 8 hole.
Which I'm fine with.
Yeah, well, I said before, I don't know if you remember this show, when I said Segura batted leadoff in Seattle.
Yeah, you said it in April.
And it was when McCutchen was struggling.
Yeah.
That his numbers in the leadoff spot are
better
the best
than anywhere else in the lineup.
Than anywhere else he hits in the lineup. So I think they keep Segura in the leadoff spot.
And I also like the fact that no more Hoskins in the 2 hole.
Yeah.
I'm so over that.
Hey, I was so against that. And guess what? All of a sudden he's down in 6 and he's producing.
Yeah, he's like an Adam Dunn, Richie Sexton hitter.
I don't like that comparison. That's more on your level there.
He's got 223
Richie Sexton
batting
was
average.
like this 6'7" guy who batted like 198.
Yeah, Hoskins is batting what, 223?
Well, his average right now stinks, but I don't hate Hoskins.
It's been going down almost every year.
I don't hate Hoskins. I just think he has the most value that you can get something for.
Listen, keep hitting home runs because then his value will never be higher. That's what I've been saying. Hit those home runs.
By the way, Richie Sexton was 6'8", 240 pounds.
How tall is Hoskins? Like 6'4"?
Not 6'8". That I know.
6'8".
All right, what do you got coming up tonight?
Dave Weinberg. I got to ask you about this. Zach Ertz, Steven. Dave's been advocating for Zach Ertz to stay here for a while now, and Dave might get his wish.
Getting closer to it.
Also, I know Dave's looking forward to the home run derby.
Cool. By the way, Cam Bedrosian.
Bedrock's son.
Yes. Somebody asked, can we call him Bedrock? Yes, you can. His name is Steve Bedrosian. He's Steve Bedrosian's son. He's a Philly now. He's Bedrock.
Bedrock Jr.
Can he win the 80s? Can he win the 2021 Cy Young like his father did in 87? No. Have a great night.